Caleb Moore stood in the marble foyer of the Caldwell mansion, prenuptial agreement trembling in his hands, reading clause after clause that stripped him of everything, his dignity, his rights, even authority over his own son. His fiancée Vanessa watched with diamond-cold eyes as her father smirked. They saw a poor teacher. They had no idea they were caging a sleeping lion. In 3 years, that contract would become their worst nightmare. Before we begin, please hit that like button and comment with your city below. I want to see how far Caleb's story travels across the world. Now, let's begin. The October rain hammered against the windows of Whitmore Academy as Caleb Moore erased the last equation from the whiteboard. His classroom smelled of chalk dust and teenage ambition, AP calculus students who'd already left for the day, rushing toward futures their parents had purchased for them. Caleb straightened the desks methodically, the way he did everything, before gathering his worn leather messenger bag. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. Dinner tonight, 7 sharp, the estate. Daddy wants to discuss wedding details. No, how was your day? No, I love you. Just instructions delivered with the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned whether the world would bend to her will. Caleb typed back a simple confirmation and pocketed the phone. Through the rain-streaked windows, he could see parents in luxury SUVs collecting their children, engines purring with the quiet confidence of German engineering. His 12-year-old Honda Civic sat alone in the far corner of the faculty lot, dignified in its poverty. Mr. Moore? He turned. Janet Reeves, the school's secretary, stood in the doorway with an apologetic smile. There's someone here for Ethan. Caleb's heart clenched the way it always did when his son's name came up unexpectedly. I'll be right there. He found Ethan in the main office, small for 8 years old, dark curls still damp from swim practice. The boy's eyes lit up when he saw his father, pure, uncomplicated love that made everything else bearable. Hey, champ, Caleb ruffled his son's hair. Thought Mrs. Patterson was picking you up today? She called, Janet interjected quietly. Her daughter's sick. I hope it's okay that I pulled Ethan from the after-school program. Of course, thank you. Caleb helped Ethan into his jacket, noting the worn cuffs, another expense he'd been postponing. Ready to go, buddy? The drive home took them through neighborhoods that shifted like geological strata, from the academy's manicured lawns to the comfortable middle-class streets where Caleb rented a modest 2-bedroom house. Ethan chattered about his day, about the science project on volcanoes, about how Tommy Richards said his dad could beat up anybody's dad. What did you say? Caleb asked, smiling despite himself. I said my dad's smarter than anybody's dad, so he doesn't have to beat anyone up. Diplomacy. I'm teaching you well. They ate an early dinner, spaghetti with marinara from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer section. Ethan did homework at the kitchen table while Caleb graded papers, both of them existing in the comfortable silence of people who'd learned to be each other's whole world. Sarah's photo watched them from the mantel. Beautiful, laughing Sarah, frozen at 29. Her life cut short by a drunk driver when Ethan was 3. 5 years gone, and some nights Caleb still reached for her in the darkness, still turned to share a joke before remembering she wasn't there. Dad? Ethan's voice pulled him back. Are you sad? No, champ, just thinking. About Mom? Caleb set down his red pen. Sometimes. Is that okay? Ethan considered this with the gravity only children possess. Miss Vanessa says we shouldn't talk about sad things. Something cold touched Caleb's spine. When did she say that? Last week, when I showed her the photo album. Caleb kept his voice gentle. You can always talk about your mom with me. Anytime. Okay? Okay. Ethan returned to his math worksheet, but the moment had shifted something. Caleb made a mental note, another small red flag to add to the collection he'd been quietly accumulating. At 6:30, Mrs. Chen from next door arrived to stay with Ethan. Caleb changed into his only suit, charcoal gray, purchased for Sarah's funeral and worn to every significant event since. In the bathroom mirror, he studied himself critically. 34 years old, lean from too many skipped meals and evening runs, dark hair, showing the first threads of silver. His face had the kind of handsomeness that came from good bone structure rather than grooming. Strong jaw, steady gray eyes, the weathered look of someone who'd survived what should have broken him. "You look nice, Mr. Moore," Mrs. Chen said when he emerged. "Special occasion?" "Wedding planning." The words tasted like coins in his mouth. The drive to the Caldwell estate took 40 minutes, carrying him through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods until he reached the gated community where Vanessa's family ruled like minor royalty. The guard waved him through with barely concealed contempt. He recognized Caleb's car, knew it didn't belong. The Caldwell mansion sprawled across 5 acres of immaculate grounds, a monument to hedge fund success and old Connecticut money. Caleb parked between a Bentley and a Tesla, his Civic looking like a stray dog that had wandered into a kennel of purebreds. The front door opened before he could knock. Morrison, the family butler, regarded him with the practiced neutrality of career staff. "Mr. Moore, they're expecting you in the west parlor." "Thank you, Morrison." The interior of the house always struck Caleb like a museum, beautiful, expensive, and utterly lifeless. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Original oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes and portraits of people who'd been dead for centuries. Everything whispered the same message: "You don't belong here." Vanessa met him at the parlor entrance. She was beautiful in the way of expensive things, artfully maintained, perfectly presented. Blonde hair fell in precise waves past her shoulders. Her dress probably cost more than Caleb's monthly salary. Diamond studs caught the light as she turned her head. "You're early," she said, offering her cheek for a kiss. Caleb complied, noting the subtle recoil when his rain-damp jacket brushed her dress. "Traffic was light. Mother and Daddy are just finishing with their accountant. We can wait in here." The parlor could have housed Caleb's entire first floor. He remained standing while Vanessa arranged herself on a cream-colored settee, phone already in hand, attention diverted to whatever populated her social media feed. "How was your day?" Caleb asked. "Fine. Lunch with Margot, then Pilates. Oh, and I finalized the florist. Peonies, white and blush. Exactly as I wanted." "That's nice." She glanced up, a small frown creasing her perfect forehead. "You could try to sound more interested. This is our wedding." "I am interested. Peonies are beautiful." "You have no idea what a peony looks like." She was right, but he didn't confirm it. They fell into silence, the kind that had become increasingly common between them. Caleb studied the woman he was supposed to marry and tried to remember why he'd proposed. It had been 6 months ago, at a charity gala for the academy. Vanessa had been there with her parents. The Caldwells donated generously to maintain their social standing. She'd been charming that night, asking intelligent questions about his teaching, laughing at his jokes. When she'd asked for his number, he'd been genuinely flattered. The courtship had been whirlwind, expensive dinners he couldn't afford to reciprocate, weekend trips to her family's summer house. She'd met Ethan and seemed enchanted by him, playing the role of potential stepmother with enthusiasm. When Caleb had nervously presented a modest engagement ring, 3 months' salary that had decimated his savings, she'd accepted with tears in her eyes. "Yes," she'd whispered. "Yes, Caleb, I love you." He'd believed her, or maybe he'd just been lonely enough to want to believe her. The door opened. Richard Caldwell entered first. Imposing in tailored wool, his silver hair swept back from a face that had been handsome before too much scotch and self-importance had thickened it. Behind him came Patricia Caldwell, perfectly preserved by expensive dermatology, wearing pearls and an expression of vague distaste. "Caleb," Richard's handshake was crushing, performative. "Good of you to come." "Of course. Vanessa said you wanted to discuss wedding plans." "Among other things." Richard moved to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey without offering Caleb anything. "Sit, please. This may take some time." Caleb sat. Vanessa remained focused on her phone. Patricia settled into a wing chair with the air of someone preparing to observe something mildly unpleasant. Richard produced a leather portfolio from his briefcase, setting it on the coffee table between them with decisive weight. "Before we proceed with the wedding, there are certain formalities to address." "Formalities? Legal protections. You understand." Richard flipped open the portfolio, revealing dense paragraphs of text. "It's nothing personal, simply prudent in this day and age." Caleb recognized a prenuptial agreement. He'd expected this. had in fact assumed it would come up eventually. Of course, that's reasonable. I'm glad you see it that way. Richard slid the document across the table. Our attorneys have prepared something comprehensive. Take your time reviewing it. Caleb picked up the contract. It was substantial. 30 pages of legal text, dense with clauses and subclauses. He began reading, and with each paragraph, something inside him went very still and very cold. The first section dealt with asset separation. Standard enough. Vanessa's considerable trust fund, her inheritance, her stock portfolio would remain solely hers. Caleb had no problem with that. He'd never wanted her money. But then came the second section. Income earned during the marriage would be considered separate property. Vanessa's business ventures would remain hers, but more pointedly, any increase in Caleb's salary, any inheritance he might receive, any financial gain whatsoever would be subject to immediate claim by Vanessa's estate in the event of divorce. The third section addressed property. The marital home, which would be purchased by the Caldwells, would remain Caldwell property. Caleb would have no equity claim regardless of how long they lived there. Section 4. Decision-making authority. All major decisions regarding residence, children's education, healthcare, and lifestyle would require majority approval of family council, which consisted of Richard, Patricia, and Vanessa. Caleb's vote counted as 1/3. He read that clause twice, certain he'd misunderstood. He hadn't. Section 5 made his hands shake. In the event of divorce, custody of any children born during the marriage would default to Vanessa unless she voluntarily relinquished it. More specifically, there was a separate clause, buried in subsection 5.3.2, addressing Ethan. In the matter of Ethan Moore, biological child of Caleb Moore from previous marriage, the parties acknowledged that while legal adoption by Vanessa Caldwell is not pursued at this time, any major decisions regarding said child's welfare, education, and upbringing shall be subject to approval by Vanessa Caldwell and her designated family representatives, given that the marital household and all financial support therein will be provided primarily through Caldwell family assets. Caleb read it again and again. They were claiming authority over his son. This section about Ethan, he began, his voice carefully level. Merely practical, Richard interrupted. Vanessa will be his stepmother, after all. It's only appropriate that she has input on decisions affecting the household. Input is different from final authority. Is it? Patricia spoke for the first time, her voice honeyed and cold. You'll be living in our home, Caleb, supported by our resources. Surely you don't expect us to have no say in how that home is run. Caleb looked at Vanessa. She'd set down her phone but wouldn't meet his eyes. This is fairly standard, she said quietly. Daddy's lawyers use similar language for all important family arrangements. Important family arrangements, Caleb repeated. Is that what our marriage is? Don't be dramatic. Well, Richard drained his whiskey. You're an intelligent man, Caleb. You understand how these things work. Vanessa is marrying significantly below her station. Richard, Patricia murmured, though her tone suggested she agreed with the sentiment. Let's be honest. Richard's eyes were hard. You're a high school teacher. Admirable profession, certainly. But let's not pretend it's the same as building what I've built. You earn what, $60,000 a year? 70 with your summer curriculum work? 65, Caleb said. 65. Right. Richard poured another drink. My daughter has a trust fund worth $40 million. Her mother's jewelry collection is worth more than you'll earn in a lifetime. Without this family, you'll continue living paycheck to paycheck, raising your son in a rented house, driving a car that should have been retired years ago. Each word landed like a carefully placed knife. Caleb felt Vanessa watching him, waiting for his reaction. We're offering you a better life, Patricia added, for you and your son. All we ask is reasonable protections for our family's interests. Caleb turned to page 18. Section 7 outlined infidelity clauses. If Caleb was unfaithful, he forfeited everything, including any claim to marital assets or custody. If Vanessa was unfaithful, the consequences were notably absent. Section 9 addressed termination. Vanessa could file for divorce at any time for any reason and retain everything. Caleb could only file on specific grounds, which would then be subject to arbitration by a panel chosen by the Caldwell family attorneys. It wasn't a prenuptial agreement. It was a contract of indentured servitude. This is... Caleb stopped, measuring his words. This is fairly comprehensive. We're thorough, Richard agreed. The wedding is in 3 weeks. We need your signature tonight. Tonight? The invitations are printed. The venue is booked. St. Catherine's doesn't wait for anyone, not even the Caldwells. Richard's tone suggested this was the greatest sacrifice imaginable. Surely you're not having second thoughts. Caleb looked at Vanessa again. She was beautiful, poised, completely unreachable. And in that moment, he saw with perfect clarity what he'd been willfully blind to for months. She'd never loved him. She'd loved the idea of slumming it, of rescuing a poor widower and his adorable son, of playing Cinderella's fairy godmother. She'd loved how it made her feel, generous, open-minded, above the petty concerns of her social circle. But she'd never seen him as an equal. None of them had. Could I have a moment, Caleb asked, to review this properly? By all means, Richard gestured expansively. Though I should mention, our attorneys will be quite displeased if we have to postpone. They've already moved on to other matters. Caleb read the entire document. Slowly, carefully, noting every clause that reduced him to a dependent, every paragraph that stripped him of agency and dignity. When he reached the final page, he found the signature line. A pen appeared in his peripheral vision. Richard, hovering like a shark scenting blood. Caleb thought about Ethan, about the small house they shared, about the life they'd built from the wreckage of Sarah's death. He thought about the man he'd been before grief had hollowed him out, and loneliness had made him vulnerable to Vanessa's calculated charm. He thought about his Uncle Marcus, dying alone in Seattle, the tech fortune everyone assumed had been spent or squandered. And he thought about the fact that these people, these smug, entitled people, genuinely believed they were doing him a favor, that he should be grateful for the opportunity to be humiliated on paper. Something crystallized inside him. Not anger. Anger was hot and loud and obvious. This was colder, sharper, clearer. This was understanding. He picked up the pen. Caleb, Vanessa said, and for just a moment he heard something almost human in her voice. Uncertainty, maybe, or the last flicker of conscience. He looked at her one final time. Are you sure this is what you want? She glanced at her parents, then back to him. It's just a formality. Right. He turned to the signature page. Just a formality. The pen scratched across the paper. Caleb Moore, in his careful teacher's handwriting. The date. Richard practically snatched the document away, checking the signature with undisguised relief. Excellent. I'll have copies made for your records. He slid the portfolio into his briefcase with the satisfied air of a man who'd just acquired something valuable on the cheap. Now then, about the ceremony itself. They spent another hour discussing flowers and seating charts, and whether the quartet should play Pachelbel or Vivaldi. Caleb participated mechanically, his mind working through calculations and timelines and possibilities. When the meeting finally ended, Vanessa walked him to the door. You're angry, she said. No. You seem angry. Caleb looked at the mansion behind her, at the life she'd been born into and would never question. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. She touched his arm, and he felt nothing. This doesn't change anything between us. You know that, right? Of course. I love you, Caleb. The words were perfectly delivered, exactly as they'd been rehearsed. He wondered if she even knew she was lying, or if the lies had become so natural she believed them herself. I love you too, he said, because it was what she expected to hear. He drove home through the rain, the prenuptial agreement in its leather portfolio sitting on the passenger seat like a coiled snake. Mrs. Chen reported that Ethan had gone to bed without any trouble. Caleb paid her, locked the door behind her, and stood in his small living room looking at the life he'd built. Pictures of Sarah, Ethan's artwork on the refrigerator, books on every surface, philosophy, mathematics, literature. The modest furniture he'd assembled himself. The worn rug Sarah had picked out at a yard sale, laughing about how it would look perfect once they had a real home. This was real. The mansion wasn't. He opened his laptop and composed an email to his Uncle Marcus's attorney, the one who'd been trying to reach him for the past 6 months, The one whose messages Caleb had been ignoring because grief over Marcus's death was still too raw. Dear Mr. Patterson, regarding my uncle's estate, I'm ready to discuss the inheritance details you mentioned. Please call at your earliest convenience. Then he went to Ethan's room and stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep. The boy had kicked off his covers as usual. Caleb tucked them back around him, brushed hair from his forehead. I promise you, he whispered. I promise you, I will never let anyone treat you as less than you are. Never. Ethan stirred, but didn't wake. Caleb returned to the living room and read the prenuptial agreement one more time, committing every insulting clause to memory. They thought they'd trapped him. They thought they'd secured their daughter's future against the grasping hands of a poor teacher who'd gotten lucky. They had no idea that in their arrogance, they'd just armed him with exactly what he needed. The contract worked both ways. Every clause that protected Vanessa's assets also protected any assets Caleb might acquire. They'd been so certain he had nothing, would always have nothing, that they'd never considered what would happen if that changed. 3 weeks later, Caleb stood at the altar of St. Catherine's Church in his rented tuxedo, watching Vanessa glide down the aisle in a dress that cost more than his car. She was radiant, triumphant, every eye in the church locked on her. No one was looking at him. They never did. The ceremony was traditional, ornate, empty. Caleb spoke his vows clearly, precisely, meaning every word in ways the gathered crowd could never understand. When the priest pronounced them married, Vanessa kissed him with the passionate performance of someone who knew exactly how many people were watching. The reception was held at the Caldwell estate. 400 guests, a 10-piece orchestra, champagne that cost more per bottle than Caleb earned in a week. He danced with his new wife, smiled for photographs, shook hands with hedge fund managers and corporate lawyers and people whose names appeared in the society pages. Richard's toast was masterful, praising Vanessa's generous heart, her willingness to look beyond social boundaries, her commitment to helping those less fortunate. The implication was crystal clear. Caleb was a charity case, and Vanessa was a saint. The applause was thunderous. Caleb caught Ethan's eye across the room. His son sat with Mrs. Chen at a table in the back, overwhelmed by the spectacle. Caleb winked at him, got a small smile in return. What are you thinking about? Vanessa asked as they swayed to some instrumental piece he didn't recognize. How beautiful you look. She preened under the compliment, missing the careful neutrality in his tone. We're going to be so happy, Caleb. I know my parents seem formal, but once you really get to know them, I'm sure. And Ethan will love having a real family again. A proper home. Caleb's hand tightened imperceptibly on her waist. He has a real family. Of course, that's what I meant, but her tone suggested otherwise. At midnight, they said their goodbyes. There would be no honeymoon. Vanessa had decided that could wait until summer, when they could do Europe properly. Instead, they would move directly into the house the Caldwells had purchased for them. Caleb had seen it once, briefly. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, in a neighborhood where the median home price exceeded $2 million. His name would not appear on the deed. As they drove away from the reception in Vanessa's Mercedes, she'd already made it clear his Civic was unsuitable for their new life. Caleb watched the mansion recede in the mirror. Behind them, Richard Caldwell stood on the portico, surveying his domain with the satisfaction of a general who just won a bloodless victory. You're quiet, Vanessa observed. Just thinking about tomorrow, about our new life together. It's going to be wonderful. She reached over to squeeze his hand. You'll see. Once you adjust to everything, it'll all feel natural. Adjust. The word choice was telling. Their new house was dark and enormous, filled with furniture Vanessa had selected without his input. Caleb carried in the few boxes he'd been allowed to bring, mostly Ethan's things and his books. Everything else had been deemed unsuitable for their new lifestyle. The master bedroom is upstairs, Vanessa said, already heading for the stairs. I'm exhausted. Today was perfect, but so draining. Caleb followed her up, each step taking him deeper into the life he'd just committed to. The bedroom was tastefully decorated in shades of cream and gold, expensive sheets, expensive pillows, expensive art on the walls. None of it felt like home. Vanessa disappeared into the bathroom, emerging 20 minutes later in silk pajamas that probably cost more than Caleb's first car. She slid into bed with practiced grace. Well, she said, her tone carrying an expectation he'd heard before. Caleb undressed mechanically, folded his clothes, joined her between sheets that felt slippery and cold. When he reached for her, she responded with technical precision, the performance of desire rather than desire itself. Afterward, she fell asleep almost immediately, satisfied with her own execution. Caleb lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his gilded cage, and waited. He wouldn't have to wait long. The honeymoon period, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 9 days. On the 10th morning of their marriage, Caleb woke to find Vanessa's side of the bed already cold. He found her in the kitchen, immaculate in workout clothes that cost more than his weekly grocery budget, scrolling through her phone while a protein smoothie whirred in a blender that looked like it belonged in a laboratory. "Good morning," he said. She glanced up briefly. "Oh, you're awake. I'm meeting Margot for spin class in 20 minutes. There's coffee if you want it." "What about Ethan? I need to get him to school." "The driver already took him." She poured the smoothie into a crystal glass. "I arranged it last night. Much more efficient than you driving him in that old car." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. "I didn't know we had a driver." "Mother insisted. She said it was inappropriate for Ethan to arrive at Whitmore Academy in a vehicle that old." "People notice these things, Caleb. He's 8 years old." Exactly. Impressions form early. She checked her reflection in the microwave surface, adjusting a strand of hair. "I also enrolled him in the Academy's extended enrichment program. Piano on Tuesdays, French on Thursdays. It's never too early to develop culture." "Vanessa, we should have discussed this." "Why?" "It's all paid for. Mother handled it." She drained the smoothie, rinsed the glass with the precise movements of someone who'd never actually washed a dish in her life. "I really need to go. Margot hates when people are late." She kissed his cheek, already a perfunctory gesture. The warmth of their wedding night evaporated, and breezed out, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the faint hum of their stainless steel refrigerator. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen that didn't feel like his, in the house that wasn't his, drinking coffee from a machine he didn't know how to operate properly. Through the window, he could see the manicured lawn, the tall privacy fence, the neighbor's equally impressive house beyond. Everything was perfect, expensive, hollow. His phone buzzed, a text from the school secretary. "Mr. Moore, your personal items have been moved to the new office. Department head wants to see you at 10. The new office. Right. That had been another executive decision delivered via Vanessa's parents. Teaching was fine as a hobby, Richard had explained over dinner 3 nights ago, but Caleb should really consider the administrative track, more prestigious, better suited to his new position in life. And conveniently, there was an opening for assistant department head that Richard's generous donations to Whitmore Academy could certainly influence. Caleb had declined, firmly, politely, and with increasing clarity that his refusal annoyed everyone at the table. "You're being stubborn," Patricia had said, her smile sharp as cut glass. "Vanessa's husband should have a title that reflects the family's standing." "My title is teacher. It's what I am." "It's what you were," Richard had corrected. "Now you're a Caldwell. Time to act like it." He'd let the subject drop that night, but the pressure hadn't relented. It came in small adjustments, subtle redirections, the constant erosion of his autonomy disguised as helpful suggestions. Caleb showered in the master bathroom that could have fit his old bedroom inside it, dressed in the clothes Vanessa had selected for him. "You need to update your wardrobe, darling. Those old things just won't do." And drove to school in the new Audi that had appeared in their driveway 4 days ago. "A wedding gift," Vanessa had announced brightly. "From Daddy. He couldn't stand seeing you in that awful Honda anymore." The Audi drove like a dream and felt like a bribe. At Whitmore Academy, Caleb found his classroom reassigned to a junior teacher and his belongings boxed in a corner office with a view of the parking lot. Department head Richard Thornton, no relation to Vanessa's father, but certainly aware of the Caldwell family's influence, greeted him with the oily enthusiasm of an administrator who just secured major funding. "Caleb, congratulations on the marriage. We're all so pleased." Thornton's handshake was damp. "Now, about this assistant department head position. I'm not interested. Don't be hasty. Think about your future. your son's future. The connections this family offers could open remarkable doors. I like teaching calculus. Of course. Noble work. But imagine the impact you could have at the administrative level. Curriculum development, policy decisions, real influence over... Mr. Thornton, Caleb kept his voice level. I became a teacher because I loved teaching, not because I wanted to climb a ladder. Thornton's smile thinned. The Caldwells have been very generous to this institution. It would be unfortunate if they felt their investment wasn't properly appreciated. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Caleb recognized the dance. He'd seen it before, in smaller ways throughout his career. Money talking, power flexing, the assumption that everyone had a price. I appreciate their generosity, Caleb said carefully, but my answer remains the same. He taught 3 classes that day, finding relief in the familiar rhythm of equations and proofs, the honest struggle of students wrestling with concepts that didn't care about wealth or status. Numbers were clean. They didn't lie or manipulate or pretend to be something they weren't. Between classes, he tried calling Ethan's new driver to confirm pickup times. The number Vanessa had given him went to a service, which transferred him to another service, which finally connected him to a bored-sounding dispatcher who informed him that all arrangements went through Mrs. Moore and he'd need to speak with her directly. I'm his father, Caleb said. Yes, sir. But Mrs. Moore has primary account authority, company policy. Caleb hung up and stared at his phone, Richard's words from the prenuptial negotiation echoing in his memory. Any major decisions regarding said child's welfare, education, and upbringing shall be subject to approval by Vanessa Caldwell and her designated family representatives. He'd signed it. He'd known what he was signing, but seeing it implemented in daily life was different from reading it on paper. That evening, he arrived home to find Vanessa hosting what she called a casual dinner party. 8 people he'd never met, discussing stock portfolios and Mediterranean vacations while uniformed servers circulated with hors d'oeuvres. There you are, Vanessa materialized at his elbow, all bright smiles. Everyone, this is my husband Caleb. Caleb, this is everyone. She laughed at her own joke. Darling, you should change. That tie is a bit academic. I came straight from work. Of course you did. She patted his arm. Why don't you freshen up? Dinner's at 8. Caleb excused himself, climbing the stairs to a bedroom that was starting to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a staging area for someone else's life. He changed into clothes Vanessa had laid out. She'd taken to selecting his outfits like he was a child who couldn't dress himself, and returned downstairs to find the conversation had moved to the dining room. He took his assigned seat, Vanessa at the head of the table, naturally, her father's training showing through, and endured 2 hours of discussion about people he didn't know, places he'd never been, and investments he didn't have. Whenever he tried to contribute, the conversation shifted smoothly around him, a river flowing past a stone. And what do you do, Caleb? Asked a woman in diamonds that could have funded a small country's economy. I teach high school calculus. The pause was fractional but telling. How dedicated of you. Caleb's being modest, Vanessa interjected smoothly. He's considering a move into administration, much better use of his talents. I'm not considering... The Caldwells are very supportive of education, Vanessa continued, as if he hadn't spoken. It's one of our family's core philanthropies. Our family. Not his family and her family. Just hers. After the guests left, air-kissing Vanessa and offering him firm handshakes and empty promises to do lunch sometime, Caleb found Ethan in his new bedroom, struggling with French homework he'd never asked for. Hey, champ. How was your day? Weird. Ethan chewed his pencil. Miss Vanessa's driver keeps calling me young master. It's creepy. Caleb smiled despite everything. You are a young master of video games and terrible knock-knock jokes. Dad? But Ethan smiled too. Can we go back to our old house? The question hit harder than it should have. This is our house now, buddy. It doesn't feel like ours. It feels like we're visiting. Out of the mouths of babes. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, a bed that probably cost more than 3 months of his old rent, and studied his son. Ethan looked small in this oversized room with its carefully curated decor and complete absence of personality. I know it's different, Caleb said carefully, but we're together. That's what matters. Miss Vanessa says I should call her Mother. Caleb's hands clenched involuntarily. What did you say? I said no. I already have a mother. Ethan's voice wobbled. She got mad. You have every right to say no. Caleb pulled his son into a hug. Your mother was Sarah. No one gets to replace her. Not ever. Miss Vanessa said that was disrespectful, that I need to adapt to our new family structure. The phrase sounded rehearsed, adult words in a child's mouth. Caleb's jaw tightened. Did she? She said if I can't be mature about it, maybe I'm not ready for the privileges this family offers. The calculated cruelty of it took Caleb's breath away. This wasn't Vanessa's natural speaking voice. This was Patricia, Richard, the whole Caldwell philosophy of conditional love and purchased loyalty filtering through his wife to poison his son. Listen to me. Caleb tilted Ethan's chin up. You don't owe anyone your mother's memory. You call Vanessa whatever you're comfortable with. If that's Miss Vanessa, fine. Mrs. Moore, okay. Vanessa, sure. But never anything that makes you uncomfortable. Got it? Ethan nodded, relief flooding his small face. And if anyone, and I mean anyone, makes you feel bad about it, you come to me immediately. Promise? Promise. After tucking Ethan in, Caleb went looking for Vanessa. He found her in the master bedroom, already in her expensive pajamas, scrolling through her phone with the vacant absorption of someone browsing through other people's curated lives. We need to talk, Caleb said. She didn't look up. About Ethan. About you pressuring him to call you mother. Now she looked up, her expression genuinely surprised. Pressuring? I was encouraging him. It's better for family cohesion if we establish proper roles. His proper role is my son. Your proper role is my wife, not his replacement mother. I'm his stepmother. That's literally my role now. Being a stepmother doesn't mean erasing his mother's memory. Vanessa set down her phone with exaggerated patience. Caleb, I know you're still grieving Sarah. We all understand that. But Ethan needs to move forward. Living in the past isn't healthy for a child. He's 8 years old. His mother died 5 years ago. He barely remembers her. The least we can do is not force him to forget her completely. No one's forcing anything. Her tone had gone cold, the warmth she'd shown during their courtship now completely absent. I'm trying to build a family here, a real family. That requires commitment from everyone, including Ethan. He's committed to being my son. That should be enough. Is it? Vanessa stood, crossing to her vanity, beginning her nightly skincare routine with mechanical precision. Because from where I'm sitting, you both seem determined to keep me at arm's length. I've given you everything, a beautiful home, financial security, social standing, and all I ask is that we function as a cohesive unit. We're not a corporation, Vanessa. We're supposed to be a family. Family requires sacrifice, compromise. Maybe if you spent less time dwelling on the past and more time building our future. Our future? Caleb felt something crack inside him. Or your parents' vision of what our future should look like. She turned, eyes flashing. What's that supposed to mean? It means every decision about our life gets filtered through Richard and Patricia. What we eat, where we live, how we raise Ethan, what I wear, what job I should have. They're helping us. They're controlling us. There's a difference. Vanessa's laugh was brittle. You're being paranoid and ungrateful. Do you have any idea how lucky you are? How many people would kill for the opportunities my family is offering? I didn't marry you for opportunities. No. You married me because you were lonely and I was convenient. The words hung in the air between them, brutal in their honesty. Caleb stared at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time since their wedding. There was no love in her eyes. There never had been. Just the self-satisfied conviction of someone who'd made a magnanimous gesture and expected eternal gratitude in return. Is that what you think? He asked quietly. I think you were a widower struggling to raise a child alone. I think you saw a chance at an easier life and you took it. Which is fine, Caleb, but don't pretend this was some grand romance. You're right, Caleb said, his voice eerily calm. I did see a chance. I just don't think either of us saw the same thing. He left her standing at the vanity, her expensive creams and serums arrayed like ammunition, and walked downstairs to the study that had been designated as his space, a consolation prize, a small room where he could retreat and pretend he had some autonomy in this house. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus's attorney. Estate settled. Wire transfer processed. Funds should clear by Friday. Congratulations on your inheritance, Mr. Moore. Caleb read the message 3 times, his heart rate strangely steady. Friday, 3 days away. The timing was almost poetic. He opened his laptop and began researching divorce attorneys. Not because he decided to file, not yet, but because he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with, what weapons had been prepared for him in that prenuptial agreement, and what options remained. The research took him deep into the night. He read case law, precedent, forum discussions from other people trapped in similar situations. The picture that emerged was bleak. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. In the event of divorce, he would leave with essentially nothing except what he'd brought into the marriage, which was almost nothing. Custody of any children born during the marriage would default to Vanessa. And that clause about Ethan, buried in subsection 5.3.2, gave her legal standing to fight for partial custody even of his biological son, given that the marital household had been their primary residence. They'd built him a beautiful cage and handed him the key to lock himself inside, but they'd made one critical assumption, that he would remain poor, that he would always need them, that gratitude and financial dependence would keep him compliant. On Friday morning, Caleb checked his bank account and found $10 million staring back at him. He sat in his study, looking at the number on the screen, and started to laugh. Not the bitter laugh of defeat, but something stranger, the laugh of a man who just realized the cosmic joke being played on everyone around him. Marcus had been eccentric, brilliant, difficult. He'd founded a tech startup in the 90s, rode the dot-com wave to ridiculous heights, and cashed out before the bubble burst. He'd never married, never had children, and had been estranged from most of his family except for Caleb, who'd been the only one to visit him regularly, to call on birthdays, to show up at his desolate Seattle apartment and play chess and talk about mathematics and philosophy without wanting anything in return. When Marcus died 6 months ago, Caleb had been too deep in his own grief, still raw from Sarah, drowning in the daily struggle of single parenthood, to process another loss. He'd ignored the attorney's calls, filed away the condolence letters, buried himself in work and Ethan's needs. He'd had no idea Marcus had left him everything. The money sat in his account, real and undeniable, and with it came a clarity that felt almost chemical. He wasn't trapped. He'd never been trapped. The prenuptial agreement that was supposed to protect the Caldwells from him worked exactly the same in reverse. Every clause that protected Vanessa's assets also protected his. They couldn't touch the inheritance. Not $1 of it. Caleb forwarded the bank statement to his personal email, created encrypted backups, and then closed the laptop. He went about his day normally, taught his classes, graded papers, picked up Ethan from school himself, ignoring the confused call from the driving service. "Where's the driver?" Ethan asked, climbing into the Audi with visible relief. "Taking the day off. Thought we'd get ice cream." "Really? Really?" They went to their old neighborhood, to the ice cream shop they used to frequent when money was tighter and joy was simpler. Ethan got chocolate chip cookie dough. Caleb got vanilla, plain, honest, exactly what it claimed to be. "Dad?" Ethan said around a mouthful of ice cream. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, champ, I think I am." "You seem different, happier." Caleb ruffled his son's hair. "Just realized something important." "What?" "That we're going to be fine. No matter what happens, we're going to be fine." That night, Vanessa announced she was pregnant. She did it over dinner, another of her elaborate productions, this one featuring Chilean sea bass and a wine that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly salary before the inheritance. She waited until the main course had been served, until he'd taken his first bite, before dropping the bomb with the casual precision of someone who'd rehearsed the moment. "I have news," she said, her smile radiant. "We're going to have a baby." Caleb set down his fork carefully. "What?" "I'm pregnant," 8 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. She reached across the table for his hand. Isn't it wonderful? His mind raced through implications, timelines, the careful choreography of their physical relationship. 8 weeks meant conception had happened right before the wedding. Maybe that night at the hotel where they'd stayed before the ceremony, when she'd been uncharacteristically enthusiastic, when she'd insisted they didn't need protection because she was taking care of it. When did you find out? He asked. 2 weeks ago. I wanted to wait until the first trimester was safer before saying anything. 2 weeks? She'd known for 2 weeks and hadn't told him. Had gone through the motions of their increasingly cold marriage, had fought with him about Ethan, had accused him of living in the past, all while carrying this secret. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Her smile faltered. I just explained. I wanted to be sure. The first trimester is delicate. You didn't think I had a right to know? Of course you have a right. That's why I'm telling you now. Irritation crept into her voice. I thought you'd be happy. This is what people do, Caleb. They get married, they have children, they build a life together. You're right. Caleb picked up his wine glass, studied the deep red liquid. We should celebrate. Really? The suspicion in her voice was poorly concealed. Really? This is wonderful news. Life-changing news. He raised his glass. To our growing family. She touched her glass to his, relief washing over her perfect features. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Mother was worried you might be, difficult. Your mother knew? Well, yes. I needed to consult with her physician. The best prenatal care, you understand. So Patricia had known before him, probably Richard too. Their child, his child, and the entire Caldwell family had been informed before he was. Of course, Caleb said, only the best. That night, lying in bed beside his sleeping wife, Caleb stared at the ceiling and processed the reality of his situation. In 6 months, he would be a father again. There would be a child, half his, half Vanessa's, who would grow up in this world of conditional love and calculated gestures. A child who would be used as leverage, as a bargaining chip, as another tool for control. Unless he changed the equation. His 35th birthday was in 2 weeks. The timing was almost too perfect to be believed. Vanessa's announcement, the inheritance clearing, the birthday that would mark him as officially middle-aged in the eyes of people like the Caldwells. He'd signed their prenuptial agreement. He'd watched them systematically dismantle his autonomy. He'd endured the subtle and not so subtle ways they'd tried to reshape him into something acceptable, something controllable, something that wouldn't embarrass them at dinner parties. And he'd learned everything he needed to know about who they really were. The next morning, Caleb woke early and went for a run through the neighborhood, past houses that could have been museums, cars that cost more than most people earned in a year, lives curated for maximum appearance and minimum authenticity. When he returned, sweating and clear-headed, he found Vanessa in the kitchen with her mother. Patricia looked up from her coffee with barely concealed disdain. Caleb, Vanessa told me the wonderful news. Congratulations. Thank you. We'll need to start planning, of course. The nursery should be professionally designed, and we'll want to line up the best pediatrician, the right preschool. It's never too early to get on the waiting list for the good ones. Of course, Caleb said. I'm so glad you're being sensible about this. Patricia's smile was vulpine. Vanessa was concerned you might have objections to proper planning. Not at all. I want what's best for our child. Our child. The phrase tasted like ashes, but he delivered it perfectly. Patricia and Vanessa exchanged satisfied glances, the look of people who just confirmed their assessment of someone as safely manageable. Caleb excused himself, showered, dressed, and drove to school. He taught his classes with unusual energy, engaged his students in debates about the beauty of mathematical proof, the elegant certainty of numbers that didn't lie or pretend or shift their values based on who was watching. At lunch, he received an email from Richard Caldwell's executive assistant. Mr. Caldwell requests your presence for dinner this evening, 7 p.m. at the club, business attire. Not an invitation. A summons. Caleb replied with a simple confirmation and spent the rest of the day preparing himself for whatever performance was about to be required. When evening came, he dressed in the expensive suit Vanessa had purchased for him, armor for a battle he hadn't chosen but was learning to fight, and drove to the club that existed solely for people wealthy enough to need somewhere to exclude everyone else. Richard was already seated at his usual table, scotch in hand, the king holding court in his castle. He gestured for Caleb to sit with the casual authority of someone who'd never considered being disobeyed. "Congratulations on the baby," Richard said without preamble. "Vanessa's thrilled." "Thank you, we both are." "Good. Good." Richard swirled his scotch. "I wanted to talk to you about the future. Your future specifically." "All right." "This teaching thing has been indulgent, but with a child on the way, it's time to think seriously about your role in this family. I have a position open at my firm, Vice President of Community Relations. Excellent salary, better benefits, and most importantly, it's work that befits a Caldwell." Caleb had been expecting this. The final push to reshape him completely, to strip away the last vestige of who he'd been before Vanessa. "That's generous, but it's not a request." Richard's voice hardened. "You're about to be a father again. Ethan needs stability. This new child will need a father who can provide properly. Teaching is noble, but it's not practical for a man in your position." "My position?" "Vanessa's husband, my son-in-law, a Caldwell." Richard leaned forward. "Stop fighting what's best for you. Accept the position. Start Monday." In that moment, Caleb saw the entire future they'd planned for him laid out like a grid. The job he didn't want, the life he didn't choose, the slow erosion of everything that made him himself until he was just another well-dressed appendage to the Caldwell legacy, grateful for the scraps they threw him, raising children who would learn that love was transactional and worth was measured in bank accounts. "I need to think about it," Caleb said. Richard's eyes went cold. "What's there to think about?" "It's a major decision. I'd like to discuss it with Vanessa." "Vanessa agrees with me. She's the one who suggested it." Of course she had. Caleb felt something crystallize inside him. Not anger, but something colder and more permanent. Understanding. Complete absolute understanding of exactly what his marriage was and what it would always be. "Nevertheless," Caleb said quietly, "I'd like the weekend to consider it." Richard studied him with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up prey that had just shown unexpected resistance. "You have until Monday morning. After that, the offer is withdrawn. And Caleb?" He smiled without warmth. "There are consequences for disappointing this family. I suggest you remember that." Caleb drove home through dark streets, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. He found Vanessa waiting up, her face tight with anticipation. "Did you talk to Daddy?" "I did." "And? Are you taking the position?" Caleb looked at his wife, beautiful, entitled, carrying his child, and realized he felt nothing for her except a kind of sad clarity. "I'm thinking about it." "What's there to think about?" Her voice climbed, frustration bleeding through. "It's an incredible opportunity. The salary alone is 3 times what you make teaching. It's not about the money." "Then what? Your precious integrity?" She laughed, the sound harsh. "Wake up, Caleb. This is the real world. People like you don't get to be noble. You take what you're offered and you're grateful for it. People like me." "Yes. People who came from nothing. People who married up. People who should have the sense to recognize when they're being handed everything they could never achieve on their own." There it was, the truth she'd been coating in sugar since they met, now served raw and bitter. Caleb felt oddly calm, like a man who'd just confirmed a diagnosis he'd suspected all along. "I'll give Richard my answer Monday," he said. He walked past her, up the stairs, to the bedroom that felt more like a stage set every day. Behind him, he heard Vanessa's frustrated cry, the slam of a door, the sound of someone who'd just realized their influence had limits. Caleb lay in bed, alone, and counted down the hours until his birthday. Until the truth would detonate in the lives of people who'd built their sense of superiority on the assumption that he would always be grateful, always be lesser, always be theirs to control. 2 more weeks. Just 2 more weeks, and then the Caldwells would learn exactly what they'd signed when they'd forced him to accept their prenuptial agreement. The 2 weeks that followed moved with the strange, suspended quality of time before a storm. Caleb went through the motions of his life, teaching, grading papers, attending Vanessa's increasingly elaborate social events, while watching the Caldwells circle closer, tightening their grip with every passing day. Richard called twice more about the job offer, his tone shifting from paternal encouragement to barely veiled intimidation. Patricia appeared at the house unannounced, ostensibly to discuss nursery plans, but really to reinforce the family's expectations. Even Vanessa's friends, women whose names Caleb could barely remember, began offering unsolicited advice about adjusting to married life and accepting help graciously. The message was clear: conform or face consequences. Caleb let them think they were winning. He nodded at appropriate moments, made non-committal sounds during Patricia's monologues about color schemes and nanny services, and watched Vanessa's growing satisfaction as she believed he was finally breaking, finally accepting his place in their carefully structured world. What they didn't see were the quiet preparations he was making. The consultation with a family law attorney, not to file for divorce, not yet, but to understand his options. The careful documentation of every decision made without his input, every instance of Vanessa or her parents overriding his parental authority with Ethan. The slow, methodical gathering of evidence that his marriage had become exactly what the prenuptial agreement had promised, a contract of control disguised as love. On the Wednesday before his birthday, Caleb overheard a conversation that confirmed everything he'd begun to suspect. He'd come home early from school, a rare gift of a canceled faculty meeting, and found Vanessa on the phone in the sunroom. She didn't hear him enter through the kitchen, didn't notice him freeze at the sound of her voice carrying through the open door. "Mother, I'm telling you, he's being impossible about this." Vanessa's tone held the petulant edge of someone unaccustomed to resistance. Daddy offered him an incredible position, and he's still hemming and hawing about his precious teaching career. Patricia's response was inaudible, but Vanessa's laugh was sharp. "Oh, please, he knew what this marriage was. A man in his position doesn't marry someone like me for love. He wanted security, status, a better life for that kid of his." A pause. "Yes, I'm aware he has a name. Ethan. Though honestly, the child is so difficult. Yesterday, he actually corrected my French pronunciation in front of the tutor. Can you imagine?" Caleb's hands clenched at his sides. He should have walked away, should have announced himself, confronted her, something. Instead, he stayed frozen, listening to his wife dissect their marriage with clinical precision. "The baby changes everything, of course," Vanessa continued. "Once our child is born, Caleb won't have any leverage left. He'll take the job because he'll have to. 2 children to support, me on maternity leave, he won't be able to afford his principles anymore." More inaudible response from Patricia. I know, you warned me about marrying someone from his background, but honestly, Mother, it was fun at first. Playing house with the struggling widower and his adorable son. Everyone thought I was so magnanimous." Her voice hardened. "But the novelty's worn off. He's supposed to be grateful, not stubborn." Caleb felt something inside him go very still and very cold. Not surprised, he'd suspected as much. But hearing it stated so baldly, with such casual cruelty, brought a clarity that was almost peaceful. "No, I haven't told him I knew about the pregnancy before the wedding," Vanessa was saying. "Why would I? That's precisely why I didn't say anything until after we were married. Insurance, Mother. You taught me that yourself. Always have insurance." The admission hung in the air like poison gas. She'd known she was pregnant before the ceremony, had deliberately hidden it from him, trapped him not just with the prenuptial agreement, but with a child he hadn't known was coming until it was too late to walk away with any dignity. "Of course I'll be a good mother," Vanessa said, irritation creeping into her voice. "To my child, the one that's actually mine. Ethan is, well, he's Caleb's responsibility, isn't he? I'm doing my part by providing a good home and paying for his education. That should be enough." Caleb backed away quietly, his heart hammering not with rage but with the terrible calm of certainty. He went upstairs, past the nursery that was already being designed by Patricia's decorator, past the master bedroom with its expensive emptiness, and into his study. He closed the door, locked it, and sat at his desk. His birthday was in 4 days. The inheritance was already secured, sitting in an account the Caldwells knew nothing about, and now he had confirmation, in Vanessa's own words, that his marriage was exactly the transaction he'd suspected from the beginning. He pulled out his phone and called the attorney he'd been consulting. "Mr. Patterson, it's Caleb Moore. I need to schedule an appointment, soon as possible. I think it's time we discuss my options in detail." That evening, Vanessa hosted another dinner party, this one to celebrate her pregnancy with her closest friends. Caleb played his role perfectly, the proud father-to-be, accepting congratulations with appropriate humility, laughing at jokes about sleepless nights and diaper changes. He watched Vanessa glow under the attention, one hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, the picture of maternal joy. No one mentioned Ethan. Not once. His son might as well have been invisible. After the guests left, Vanessa found Caleb in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher, a task that scandalized her, though she'd never say so directly. "You don't have to do that. The cleaning service comes tomorrow." "I don't mind." She leaned against the counter, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You've been different lately. Distant." "Have I?" "Don't play games, Caleb. What's going on with you?" He closed the dishwasher, dried his hands methodically. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the job with your father." Her face brightened immediately. "And?" "You're right. It's a good opportunity, better money, better benefits." He met her eyes. "Better for our growing family. So you'll take it." "I'll give Richard my answer after my birthday. Seems like the right time for new beginnings." Vanessa crossed the kitchen and kissed him, actual warmth in the gesture for the first time in weeks. "I'm so glad you're finally being reasonable about this. You'll see. Once you're working with Daddy, everything will be easier. We'll be a real family." A real family. The word should have meant something. Instead, they felt like the final nail in a coffin he'd been building since the night he'd signed their prenuptial agreement. Friday came. His 35th birthday. Caleb woke to find Vanessa already gone, a note on her pillow. "Shopping with Mother. Back this afternoon. Happy birthday." He made breakfast for Ethan, who presented him with a hand-drawn card featuring stick figures and the words, "World's Best Dad," in careful 8-year-old handwriting. The gift was worth more than anything Vanessa had ever given him. At school, his students surprised him with a cake. Chocolate, his favorite, which they'd somehow discovered. They sang off key and laughed when he pretended to struggle blowing out the candles. And for those few minutes, surrounded by teenagers who saw him as a teacher rather than an acquisition, Caleb felt almost normal. His phone rang during lunch period. Unknown number. "Mr. Moore. This is Jennifer Chen from the Seattle Tribune. I'm calling about your Uncle Marcus's estate settlement. We're running a feature on tech philanthropists and wondered if you'd comment on your inheritance." Caleb's blood went cold. "I'm sorry, what?" "The $10 million inheritance from Marcus Chen? It's public record, sir. The estate filing was published this morning. We're hoping to get a statement from you about how you plan to honor your uncle's legacy." I'll have to call you back." He hung up, his hands shaking. Public record. Of course it was. Estate settlements of that size were always filed publicly. He'd known this was coming, but hadn't expected the media attention, hadn't anticipated that the news would break today, on his birthday, before he'd had a chance to control the narrative. His phone started buzzing with texts, unknown numbers, journalists, but also people from school, friends from his old neighborhood, distant relatives crawling out of the woodwork. And then, the ones that made his stomach drop. Richard Caldwell, Patricia, Vanessa's brother Graham, who'd barely spoken to him at the wedding. Richard's message was brief. "We need to talk. Immediately." Caleb silenced his phone and taught his afternoon classes in a fog. The students noticed his distraction but were kind enough not to comment. When the final bell rang, he sat at his desk, staring at the equations on his whiteboard, and tried to prepare himself for what was coming. He drove home slowly, giving the Caldwells time to gather their forces. The house looked the same from the outside, imposing, perfect, lifeless. But he could feel the shift in the air before he even opened the door. They were waiting in the living room. All of them. Richard, Patricia, Graham, and Vanessa, arrayed like a tribunal. Vanessa's face was blotchy with tears. Real or performed, Caleb couldn't tell anymore. Patricia looked like she'd tasted something rancid. Richard's expression was pure calculation, already working through the implications. $10 million, Richard said without preamble. Care to explain? Caleb set down his messenger bag carefully. My uncle Marcus passed away 6 months ago. He left me his estate. The settlement cleared last week. Last week? Vanessa's voice cracked. You've known for a week and you didn't tell me? I'm telling you now. Now? After we find out from the newspaper? After the whole world knows before your own wife? She stood, her hands shaking. What else have you been hiding? The irony was so rich Caleb almost laughed. That's an interesting question coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not the only one in this room who's been keeping secrets. Patricia cut in smoothly. This is hardly the time for accusations. We're your family, Caleb. We deserve honesty. Do you? Caleb looked around at the assembled Caldwells, seeing them clearly, really clearly, for the first time. Tell me, when exactly did you plan to be honest with me? When were you going to mention that Vanessa knew she was pregnant before our wedding? The silence was deafening. Vanessa's face went white. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Richard's expression didn't change, but Caleb saw the minute recalculation happening behind his eyes. I overheard your phone call, Caleb said to Vanessa. Wednesday afternoon. You and your mother discussing how the baby was insurance, how you deliberately waited to tell me until after we were married. That's not... I didn't mean... Vanessa stumbled over her words. You also mentioned that marrying me was fun at first, playing house with the struggling widower. Novelty that wore off. Caleb's voice was eerily calm. Tell me, which part of our vows was sincere? Any of it? How dare you? Patricia rose indignant. After everything this family has done for you, done for me, Caleb laughed, the sound hollow. You mean the prenuptial agreement that strips me of every basic human right? The constant pressure to quit my job, abandon my principles, become whatever version of me fits your social calendar. The complete dismissal of my son as anything more than an inconvenient accessory? Ethan has been given every advantage, Richard said coldly. Ethan has been made to feel like a burden. Vanessa told him he needed to adapt to your family structure or lose his privileges. What kind of family threatens an 8-year-old child? You're twisting everything, Vanessa cried. I've been trying to build a life with you, a real life, and you've been lying to me about $10 million. I didn't lie. I just didn't volunteer information about my personal finances. Caleb met her eyes. Tell me, Vanessa, would you have treated me differently if you'd known? Would you have been kinder, more respectful? Or would you have just moved up the timeline on whatever endgame you've been planning? There is no endgame. Isn't there? Caleb turned to Richard. The job offer, the pressure to quit teaching, the systematic isolation from my old life. It's all about control, isn't it? Keep me dependent, keep me grateful, keep me in line. Richard's mask finally cracked, showing the steel beneath. You self-righteous fool. You think your little inheritance makes you our equal. 10 million is pocket change. It's a rounding error on Vanessa's trust fund. The only thing that's changed is that you're now slightly less pathetic than you were yesterday. Richard, Patricia murmured, but there was no real censure in her tone. No, he needs to hear this. Richard stood, his full height meant to intimidate. You married into this family. That comes with expectations, responsibilities. Whether you have money or not, you're still just a high school teacher who got lucky. And you will take that job on Monday, and you will make this marriage work, because the alternative... He let the threat hang in the air. The alternative is what? Caleb asked quietly. Divorce? Please, Richard, threaten me with the thing I've been researching for 2 weeks. The room went deathly still. You've been planning to leave me? Vanessa's voice was small, shocked. This whole time? I've been planning to survive, Caleb corrected. There's a difference. I wanted this marriage to work, Vanessa. I really did. But you never wanted a husband. You wanted a project, a charity case you could rescue and show off to your friends. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me one thing you know about me. One thing that matters. My favorite book. My mother's name. What I was studying when I met Sarah. Anything. Vanessa stared at him, her mouth opening and closing uselessly. You can't, Caleb said, because you never cared enough to ask. I was just the poor widower with the cute kid, a story you could tell at parties about your generous heart. You married me for my money, Vanessa shot back, finding her anger. Don't pretend this was anything else. I married you because I was lonely and you were kind, or I thought you were. Caleb's voice softened with genuine sadness. I married you because I wanted to believe that love could happen twice, that Ethan could have a mother figure, that we could build something real. We still can, Vanessa said desperately. If you just stop being so stubborn about everything. Stop being myself, you mean. Stop caring about my son. Stop teaching. Stop thinking. Stop existing as anything other than Vanessa Caldwell's acceptable husband. He shook his head. That's not a marriage. That's erasure. Patricia's voice cut through like a blade. You signed the prenuptial agreement. You understood the terms. I did. Every word of it. Caleb smiled without warmth. Including the parts that work in my favor. Richard's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The asset separation clause. Section 2. Income and assets acquired during the marriage shall remain the separate property of the acquiring party. You wrote that to protect Vanessa's trust fund and inheritance. But it protects mine too. Every dollar Marcus left me is mine alone. You can't touch it. The realization washed over Richard's face like cold water. That's right, Caleb continued. You were so busy making sure I couldn't claim anything of Vanessa's that you gave me ironclad protection for anything I acquired. The prenuptial agreement you forced me to sign, it's my shield now. You manipulative, Richard started. Careful, Caleb interrupted. I'm not the one who presented a one-sided contract and called it marriage. I just read the fine print more carefully than you thought I would. Graham finally spoke, his voice uncertain. So what are you saying? You're keeping the money and filing for divorce? I'm saying I have options now, real options. And I'm saying that this family's ability to control me through financial dependence just evaporated. Caleb looked at each of them in turn. I'm saying the power dynamic just shifted, and you all know it. You're still married to my daughter, Richard said, his voice dangerous. Still bound by that contract. The contract that gives Vanessa primary authority over our children, you mean? Caleb's jaw tightened. The contract that tries to give you control over my son? Yes, I'm aware. I'm also aware that family courts don't look kindly on agreements that strip fit parents of their rights, especially when there's evidence that the child's well-being was being subordinated to the stepfamily's social preferences. You have no evidence, Patricia said sharply. Don't I? Ethan's school records show every change made without my consultation. The enrollment in programs I never approved, the psychological evaluation you ordered without my knowledge. Caleb had been thorough. I have documentation of every decision made by this family that overrode my parental authority, every instance where my son was made to feel lesser for honoring his mother's memory. Vanessa sank back onto the couch, her face ashen. You've been building a case against us. I've been protecting my son. There's a difference. And our baby? Her hand went to her stomach. What about the child I'm carrying? The question hung in the air, and for the first time that evening, Caleb's careful composure cracked. That's the only reason I'm still here. The only reason I haven't already filed for divorce. So you do want to leave me? I want to be in a real marriage, with a partner who respects me, who sees Ethan as a child to be loved, not an obligation to be managed. Caleb's voice roughened with emotion. I want our baby to grow up in a home where love isn't conditional on compliance, where children aren't taught that worth is measured in bank accounts and social standing. That's not what we're teaching, Patricia protested. It's exactly what you're teaching. It's all you know how to teach. Caleb turned back to Vanessa. You're pregnant with my child. That baby deserves better than parents who can barely stand each other. Better than a father who's been systematically stripped of authority and a mother who sees children as accessories to the right lifestyle. I don't... Vanessa's voice broke. I don't see our baby that way. Don't you? Then tell me honestly. Would you have hidden the pregnancy if you'd known about my inheritance? Would you have married me at all, or would you have found someone more naturally suited to your world? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The truth was written all over her face. Caleb felt something inside him break, clean and final. Not his heart. That had been breaking slowly for weeks. This was the death of hope, of the desperate belief that somehow they could make this work. "I'm going to make you an offer," he said quietly. "One time only. Are you listening?" They were all listening, the entire Caldwell family frozen in tableau. "I will not divorce you," Caleb said. "Not now, while you're pregnant. Our child deserves to be born into an intact family, even if that family is broken. But in exchange, things change, immediately." "Change how?" Richard demanded. "Ethan's welfare becomes non-negotiable. No more unilateral decisions about his education, his schedule, his life. He calls Vanessa whatever he's comfortable with, and no one pressures him otherwise. He gets therapy if he needs it, and I choose the therapist." "That's reasonable," Graham said, earning a sharp look from his father. "Second," Caleb continued, "I keep my job. I teach because I love teaching, because it matters, because it's who I am. The pressure to join Richard's firm stops. Today." "That's your ego talking," Richard said. "That's my identity. Take it or leave it." "Fine," Vanessa whispered. "Fine, keep your job. What else?" "Third, we go to marriage counseling, real counseling, with a therapist I approve. Not one of Patricia's society friends who'll tell us to work harder at being grateful." Patricia's mouth thinned to a line, but she said nothing. "Fourth, the controlling behavior stops. The decorating my office without asking. The selecting my clothes, the making decisions about our lives and presenting them as fait accompli. We discuss things like partners, or this marriage is over the day our child is born." "Anything else?" Richard asked sarcastically. "Yes. You acknowledge that the inheritance is mine. Not family money, not something to be managed by the Caldwell financial advisors, not a resource you can tap into for your projects. Mine. Completely and totally mine." "It's already protected by the prenup," Richard pointed out. "What's the point?" "The point is acknowledgement. The point is that you stop seeing me as the charity case who stumbled into money and start seeing me as your daughter's husband, Ethan's father, an equal partner in this family." "Equal," Patricia scoffed. "You really think—" "Mother." Vanessa's voice was stronger now, cutting through. She stood, walked to Caleb, and for the first time in weeks, really looked at him. "You mean all of this? You'd really leave me if I don't agree?" "After the baby is born, if nothing changes?" "Yes. I'd fight for custody of our child, fight to protect Ethan, and I'd walk away from this family without looking back." "And if I agree? If we do everything you're asking?" Caleb studied his wife's face, searching for any hint of the woman he'd thought he'd married. "Then we try, really try. Not you trying to change me or me trying to survive you, both of us trying to build something real." "What if it doesn't work? What if we try and it's still not enough?" "Then at least we'll know we tried. Our child will know we tried. That's more than most people get." The room was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel, a wedding gift from some Caldwell ancestor, marking time that suddenly felt precious and finite. "I agree," Vanessa said finally. "To all of it. The therapy, the changes, everything." "Vanessa," Richard warned. "No, Daddy. He's right." She turned to her father, and Caleb saw something shift in her expression, the first glimmer of spine he'd witnessed in their entire marriage. "We've been controlling him, all of us, treating him like he should just be grateful for the opportunity to exist in our world." "We gave him everything," Patricia protested. "We gave him things," Vanessa corrected. "We never gave him respect. We never gave him agency. We certainly never gave him love." The admission hung in the air, brutal in its honesty. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said, turning back to Caleb. "I'm so sorry. You're right about all of it. The pregnancy, the manipulation, using Ethan as leverage. I thought—" She trailed off, tears spilling over. "I thought I was being smart, protecting myself. I didn't realize I was destroying us." Caleb wanted to feel satisfaction at the apology. Instead, he just felt tired. "Words are easy, Vanessa. Action is what matters." "Then I'll act, starting now." She faced her parents. "No more interference with Ethan. No more pressure on Caleb about his career, and from now on, decisions about our life get made by us, not by family committee." Richard's face darkened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe. but it's my mistake to make. Vanessa's hand found Caleb's, tentative. Our mistake, if we make it together. The rest of the evening passed in uncomfortable negotiation, working out details and boundaries. Richard pushed back on every point. Patricia made passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern, but Graham, surprisingly, sided with Vanessa, pointing out that the Caldwell approach to family had left its share of wreckage over the years. By the time the family finally left, Caleb felt wrung out, exhausted down to his bones. Vanessa stood at the door after they'd gone, her back to him, shoulders trembling. "I really am sorry," she whispered. "I know you don't believe me. I want to believe you, but you don't trust me." She turned, her face blotchy and raw. "I don't blame you. I haven't given you any reason to trust me." "No, you haven't. How do I fix this? Tell me how to fix this." Caleb looked at the woman carrying his child, the woman who'd manipulated and controlled him, who'd hidden her pregnancy and mocked him to her mother, and tried to find something worth saving. "You start by being honest. Completely honest. No more secrets, no more games. If you're scared or angry or uncertain, you say so. If your parents are pressuring you, you tell me. If you think I'm being unreasonable, we discuss it like adults." "Okay, I can do that." "And Ethan, you have to try with him. Really try. Not as a project or an obligation, but as a child who lost his mother and deserves kindness." "I will, I promise." Promises. Caleb had heard so many promises in his life, had made quite a few himself. They were easy to speak and hard to keep, fragile things that broke under the weight of inconvenience. "We'll see," he said finally. That night, lying in bed with Vanessa curled on her side of the mattress, Caleb stared at the ceiling and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or given their marriage the only chance it had ever really had. His 35th birthday had detonated exactly as he'd expected, but the fallout was different than he'd imagined. Messier, more complicated, more human. His phone buzzed with a text from the attorney. "Saw the news. Congratulations. Let me know if you need anything." Caleb typed back a brief thanks and deleted the message thread. He wasn't filing for divorce. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if Vanessa meant what she'd said. But the inheritance sat in his account like a safety net, like evidence that he wasn't trapped, wasn't helpless, wasn't the charity case the Caldwells had believed him to be. The money had bought him something more valuable than luxury or status. It had bought him choice. And in the end, choice was all anyone really needed to build a life worth living. The morning after the confrontation, Caleb woke to find Vanessa already up, standing by the window in her nightgown, one hand pressed against the glass. Early sunlight caught the curve of her profile, and for just a moment, she looked vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. "I couldn't sleep," she said without turning. "Kept thinking about everything I said to Mother on that phone call, everything you heard." Caleb sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about it too. I meant what I said last night. About changing, but I don't actually know how." She finally turned to face him, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "I've been this person my whole life, Caleb. The person my parents wanted. The person who says the right things and makes the right decisions and never questions whether any of it is real. Then maybe it's time to figure out who you are when no one's telling you who to be." She laughed, the sound brittle. "That's terrifying." "I know." They stood there in the early morning quiet, two people who'd made promises to each other without understanding what those promises would cost. The silence stretched between them, not comfortable, but not hostile either. Just the uncertain space of people who'd finally stopped performing for each other. "I made an appointment," Vanessa said finally, "with a marriage counselor. Someone who came recommended through the hospital, not through Mother's network. First session is Thursday afternoon, if you can make it." It was such a small thing, this gesture of independence, but Caleb recognized its significance. "I'll be there." And I called the tutoring service, told them Ethan's schedule goes back to what it was before. Piano and French are canceled unless he wants them. "Does he?" "I don't know. I never asked." She moved to the bed, sat on the edge with careful distance between them. "I never asked him about anything, did I? Just made decisions and expected him to adapt. You can start asking now." "What if he hates me? What if I've already ruined any chance of him seeing me as anything other than the woman who replaced his mother?" Caleb considered lying, offering false reassurance, but dishonesty was what had brought them here. Then you'll have to earn his trust back. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy, but kids are more forgiving than adults. If you're genuine with him, he'll respond. Vanessa nodded slowly, processing this. Your inheritance. The 10 million. Are you going to tell me what you plan to do with it? I haven't decided yet. Marcus loved education, technology, innovation. I'm thinking about setting up a scholarship fund in his name. Maybe something for students who want to pursue math and science but don't have the resources. That's generous. It's appropriate. Marcus never cared about money for its own sake. He cared about what it could enable. Unlike my family, I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Vanessa stood, moved toward the bathroom. I'm going to shower. Then I thought maybe I could make breakfast. Actually make it, not have the cook prepare something. Would you and Ethan eat with me? The offer was so tentative, so unlike the confident woman who'd swept into his life months ago, that Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, they were far from that, but maybe the possibility of it. We'd like that, he said. Breakfast was awkward but genuine. Vanessa burned the eggs and over-toasted the bread, and Ethan watched her fumble through the kitchen with wide-eyed fascination, like he was witnessing an exotic species in unfamiliar habitat. I didn't know you could cook, Ethan said, poking at his blackened bacon. I can't, apparently. Vanessa laughed at herself. But I'm trying. That counts for something, right? I guess, Ethan chewed thoughtfully. It tastes okay. Better than the stuff the cook makes. That's always too fancy. You think so? Vanessa looked genuinely pleased. Good, because this might be the only thing I know how to make. After breakfast, while Vanessa cleaned up with the determined inefficiency of someone who'd never actually washed dishes before, Caleb took Ethan aside. What do you think? He asked quietly. About Vanessa trying. Ethan shrugged with the studied nonchalance of 8-year-olds everywhere. She seems different, less scary. Scary? She always seemed like she was mad at me for existing, like I was messing up her perfect house just by being in it. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen where Vanessa was battling with the dishwasher. But today she seems more like a regular person. Out of the mouths of babes. Caleb ruffled his son's hair. People can change, champ, if they want to. Do you think she wants to? I think she's starting to. The days that followed established a new rhythm, tentative and uncertain, but undeniably different. Vanessa attended the first therapy session with visible nervousness, gripping Caleb's hand in the waiting room like she was preparing for surgery. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Winters, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with kind eyes and zero tolerance for evasion, cut through their defenses within the first 15 minutes. Let me be clear about something, Dr. Winters said, looking between them. I'm not here to save your marriage. I'm here to help you both figure out if it's worth saving, and if so, what that actually looks like. Fair? Fair, Caleb agreed. Vanessa nodded, pale but resolute. The session was brutal. Dr. Winters asked questions neither of them wanted to answer, forced them to articulate feelings they'd been avoiding, and refused to let them hide behind politeness or performance. By the end of the hour, Vanessa was crying quietly, and Caleb felt emotionally flayed. Same time next week, Dr. Winters said as they left. And I want you both to keep journals between sessions. Write down moments when you feel connected to each other and moments when you feel most distant. We'll discuss them. In the car, Vanessa wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. That was horrible. Yeah. Do we really have to do it again? If we're serious about this, yes. She nodded, started the engine. Okay, then we'll do it. But while Vanessa seemed committed to change on the surface, old patterns died hard. 3 days after their first therapy session, Caleb came home to find Patricia in their living room, holding paint swatches and discussing nursery plans with Vanessa like the confrontation had never happened. Caleb, perfect timing, Patricia said brightly. We're deciding between sage and powder blue for the nursery. Which do you prefer? The presumption that she had any right to be here making decisions made Caleb's jaw tighten. But he looked at Vanessa first, waiting to see how she'd handle this. Vanessa caught his eye, and he saw the moment of decision play across her face. Actually, Mother, Caleb and I haven't discussed the nursery yet. Maybe you should go and we can call you once we've figured out what we want." Patricia's smile froze. "But, darling, I'm here now. We might as well—" "Mother!" Vanessa's voice was firmer. "Caleb and I will handle this. We'll let you know when we need your input." It was a small victory, but the flush of triumph on Vanessa's face made it significant. Patricia left with barely concealed irritation, and once the door closed, Vanessa turned to Caleb with uncertain pride. "How was that?" "That was good, really good." It felt terrifying. Standing up to them usually does. They spent the evening actually discussing the nursery, not just colors but philosophy, what kind of environment they wanted for their child. Vanessa admitted she'd always assumed the baby would have a nanny, a night nurse, all the professional help money could buy. Caleb explained that he wanted to be present, hands-on, the way he'd been with Ethan even when exhaustion and grief had made every day feel impossible. "I don't know if I can do that," Vanessa said honestly. "Be the kind of mother who changes diapers and handles midnight feedings." "Then we'll learn together, and when it gets too hard, we'll ask for help, but from each other first." "Okay." She placed her hand over her growing belly. "Okay, we can try." The next Sunday, Vanessa did something Caleb never expected. She asked Ethan if he wanted to help her bake cookies. Ethan looked at his father with profound suspicion. "Is this a trick?" "No trick," Vanessa said, and Caleb heard the genuine nervousness in her voice. "I thought maybe we could do something together, if you want to." "What kind of cookies?" "I have no idea. Whatever kind you like." They spent 2 hours in the kitchen making an ungodly mess and producing cookies that were simultaneously burnt and undercooked. Ethan laughed when Vanessa dropped an entire bag of chocolate chips on the floor, and she laughed too. Real laughter, not the practice sound she deployed at dinner parties. Caleb watched from the doorway, not interfering, barely breathing. When Vanessa lifted Ethan up to put cookies on the high shelf and his son didn't flinch away, something in Caleb's chest loosened just slightly. "These are terrible," Ethan announced, biting into a misshapen cookie. "Absolutely awful," Vanessa agreed. "Can we make more next week?" Vanessa met Caleb's eyes over Ethan's head, and he saw hope there, fragile and new. "Yeah, we can make more next week." But progress wasn't linear. 2 days later, Caleb overheard Vanessa on the phone with her mother, slipping back into old patterns. "I know, Mother. I'm trying to include him in decisions, but honestly, his taste is so pedestrian." A pause. "No, I haven't said anything. I just let him think he has input and then make the actual decisions myself." Caleb stood outside the door, listening to his wife confirm what he'd suspected, that some of her changes were performance rather than genuine transformation. When she hung up, he walked in. "How much of this is real?" he asked without preamble. Vanessa startled. "How much of what?" "The therapy, the boundary setting, the trying with Ethan. How much is genuine, and how much is just another performance to keep me from leaving?" She opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. The practiced lie died on her tongue, and what came out instead was raw truth. "I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out myself." "That's not good enough." "I know it's not." She stood, faced him directly. "I know I keep slipping back. My whole life, Caleb, I've been taught to manage appearances, to say what people want to hear while doing what's actually necessary. It's not an excuse, but it's what I know." "Then you need to learn something different." "I'm trying." Her voice rose, frustration bleeding through. "Do you think this is easy for me? Standing up to my parents, burning cookies with your son, sitting in therapy admitting all my worst qualities. I'm trying, and it's not enough, and I don't know what else you want from me. I want you to stop trying to be enough and just be honest. Stop managing me like I'm another social situation to navigate. Stop pretending you're someone you're not because you think that's what I need. What if who I really am isn't someone you can love?" The question hung between them, naked and afraid. Caleb looked at his wife, beautiful, damaged, trying and failing and trying again, and felt the impossible weight of their situation. "Then at least I'd know," he said quietly. "At least we'd both know what we're working with." That night, Vanessa wrote him a letter. She left it on his desk in the study, and when Caleb found it after midnight, unable to sleep, He almost didn't read it. But curiosity, or maybe hope, made him unfold the pages. The handwriting was hers, elegant and controlled, but the words were anything but. Caleb, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you need, or the mother our child deserves, or even just someone real instead of this carefully constructed version of myself that I've been performing my entire life. You asked me to tell you one thing I know about you that matters. I couldn't answer then, and it's been haunting me. So here's what I know now, after months of watching you. You read to Ethan every night, even when you're exhausted. You grade papers with green pen instead of red because you don't want students to feel like they're bleeding. You think about Sarah when you drink your coffee in the morning. I can see it in your face, the way you pause before that first sip. These are small things. They shouldn't matter in the grand scheme of prenuptial agreements and trust funds and family empires. But they're real, and they're you, and I never noticed them until I realized I was losing you. I don't know if I can change enough. I don't know if the person I've been pretending to be can become the person I need to be. But I want to try. Not because I'm afraid of divorce or losing my parents' approval or any of the logical reasons. I want to try because, for the first time in my life, I met someone who didn't want anything from me except honesty, and I'm terrified I've already destroyed that. I'm sorry for the pregnancy trap. I'm sorry for letting my parents control you. I'm sorry for every moment I made Ethan feel unwanted. I'm sorry for being exactly the person you feared I was. But I'm asking you to let me try to become someone different, someone real. Even if I fail, even if we end up divorcing anyway, I want to try to be the person who deserves the second chance you're offering. Vanessa Caleb read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation or performance, finding only the messy honesty of someone who'd finally stopped editing herself. It wasn't enough to fix everything. It wasn't even enough to guarantee they'd make it. But it was real. And real was more than they'd had before. The next morning, he left a note on her pillow. Keep trying. That's all I'm asking. The weeks flowed into months with the strange acceleration of time marked by doctor's appointments and therapy sessions and small moments of unexpected grace. Vanessa's pregnancy progressed, her body changing in ways that made her irritable and vulnerable and somehow more human than Caleb had ever seen her. She threw up every morning for 6 weeks straight and cried when her favorite jeans wouldn't button. She developed strange cravings, pickles and ice cream, pancakes at midnight, Thai food so spicy it made her eyes water. She was ridiculous and exhausted and more herself than she'd ever been. And slowly, impossibly, Ethan started warming to her. It happened in increments. The morning she sat with him through a nightmare, not knowing what to do but staying anyway. The afternoon she defended him to Patricia when his grandmother criticized his table manners. The evening she asked about his dead mother, actually asked with genuine curiosity, and listened to his stuttering answers without trying to redirect or minimize. What was she like? Vanessa asked over dinner one night. Your mom. Ethan looked at his father for permission. Caleb nodded. She was funny, Ethan said quietly. She made up songs about everything, like she had a song about eating vegetables and one about putting on shoes. Dad says I have her smile. You do, Caleb confirmed. And her eyes. Do you miss her? Vanessa asked. Sometimes. It's hard to remember what she looked like without the pictures. But Dad tells me stories. Vanessa reached across the table, hesitated, then gently touched Ethan's hand. Would you tell me a story about her sometime? I'd like to know her through you. Ethan considered this with the seriousness of children processing adult emotions. Okay, yeah, I could do that. After Ethan went to bed, Vanessa found Caleb in the study. Did I do that right, with Ethan and asking about Sarah? You did that perfectly. I wanted to fix it, to make him feel better, but I just listened instead. That's exactly what he needed. She settled into the chair across from his desk, one hand absently rubbing her swelling belly. I'm starting to understand why you fought so hard for him, why you were willing to walk away from everything to protect him. He's my son. I know, but it's more than that. You love him unconditionally, not because he's convenient or because he reflects well on you, just because he exists. Her voice caught. I don't know if my parents ever loved me that way. Caleb set down his pen. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's clarifying, actually. Understanding that their love always came with conditions helps me understand why I didn't know how to love you without them. She met his eyes. I'm learning, though, how to just love someone for who they are, not who they could become or what they could provide. That's all anyone can ask. The therapy sessions continued week after painful week of excavating their relationship's foundations and discovering how little they'd actually built on before rushing into marriage. Dr. Winters was merciless in her honesty, calling them both out when they fell into familiar patterns. "You're doing it again, Vanessa," Dr. Winters said during their 8th session, deflecting with humor instead of addressing the actual issue. "I'm not deflecting, you're uncomfortable, so you're making jokes. And Caleb, you're letting her do it instead of pushing back because confrontation makes you anxious." I'm not anxious, I'm just avoiding conflict by going quiet and hoping the problem resolves itself. Dr. Winters looked between them. "You're both so busy protecting yourselves that you can't actually reach each other. That has to stop." They fought more after that session, real fights with raised voices and actual grievances aired instead of swallowed. It was ugly and uncomfortable and weirdly healing. They learned that they could be angry with each other and survive it, that conflict didn't mean abandonment, that honesty, even painful honesty, was better than the polite performance they'd been maintaining. But the real test came when Richard showed up unannounced on a Saturday morning, interrupting breakfast with the presumption of a man who'd never been told no. "Caleb, we need to discuss your inheritance," Richard announced, settling into their kitchen like he owned it. "I've had my financial advisors review the situation, and frankly, your current management strategy is irresponsible." Caleb set down his coffee carefully. "My inheritance isn't your business, Richard." "Of course it is. You're family now, and family looks out for each other's interests. By looking out, you mean taking control. I mean ensuring that money is properly invested, properly protected. 10 million may seem like a lot to you, but it's remarkably easy to squander without proper guidance." Vanessa, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "Daddy, Caleb has the right to manage his own finances." "Darling, I know you're feeling protective, but this is men's business." "Men's business?" Vanessa's voice went sharp. "Or Caldwell business? Because last I checked, Caleb's inheritance has nothing to do with you." Richard's expression hardened. "I'm trying to help." "No, you're trying to control. Again, and I'm telling you to stop." The room went silent. Caleb watched his wife face down her father with visible trembling but unwavering resolve and felt something shift permanently between them. "Vanessa," Richard said carefully, "you're hormonal. The pregnancy is affecting your judgment." "My judgment is fine. What's affecting it is finally seeing clearly how this family operates." Caleb was right. Everything is about control, money, influence, even relationships. Well, I'm done with that. "You're making a mistake." "Then it's my mistake to make, in my house, which you need to leave. Now." Richard stood, his face flushed with anger. "You're choosing him over your own family." "I'm choosing honesty over manipulation. There's a difference." Vanessa opened the front door. "I love you, Daddy, but I don't like who I am when I follow your example. So either you accept that Caleb and I make our own decisions, or you can leave and come back when you're ready to respect our boundaries." Richard left without another word, and after the door closed, Vanessa turned to Caleb with shaking hands and wide eyes. "Did I really just do that? You really did. Oh my God!" She started laughing and crying simultaneously. "Oh my God, I told my father to leave. I've never told my father anything." Caleb pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake against him. "I'm proud of you." "I think I'm going to throw up." "That's the pregnancy." "No, that's terror. What if he disowns me? What if Mother never speaks to me again?" "Then we'll figure it out together." She pulled back to look at him. "You mean that?" "I mean that." Something in her face changed then, a wall finally coming down completely. "I love you. I don't know if I ever actually said that and meant it, but I do. I love you." The words should have felt triumphant. Instead, they felt quiet and serious and real, the kind of love built on foundations of actual knowledge rather than romantic fantasy. "I love you too," Caleb said, surprised to discover it was true. Not the love he'd had for Sarah, which had been young and uncomplicated and rooted in a simpler version of himself. This was adult love, hard-won and clear-eyed, built on seeing someone's worst qualities and choosing them anyway. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, they sat together in the nursery they'd been slowly preparing. Vanessa had insisted on doing it themselves rather than hiring decorators, and the result was charmingly imperfect. Paint slightly uneven, furniture assembled with more enthusiasm than skill. "Do you think we can actually do this?" Vanessa asked, one hand on her belly where their daughter was kicking. "Be good parents? Build a real family? I think we're already doing it. Messily, imperfectly, but doing it. What if I slip back? What if I revert to who I was? Then I'll call you on it, and you'll do the work to change again. That's what marriage is, constantly choosing each other, over and over, even when it's hard." Vanessa leaned against him, and for the first time since their wedding, Caleb felt like they were actually on the same team. Not perfectly aligned, not without conflicts or challenges ahead, but together in a way that mattered. "I never asked what you're going to name her," Vanessa said softly. "We're going to name her, together. I'd like to include Sarah somehow, if that's okay, to honor Ethan's mother." The offer was so unexpected, so genuinely thoughtful, that Caleb had to blink back sudden emotion. "You'd do that? She was important to you. She gave you Ethan, and from what he's told me, she sounds like she was remarkable. Our daughter should know she's connected to that legacy." They sat in the quiet nursery, feeling the baby move beneath Vanessa's skin, planning a future that no longer terrified them quite so much. Outside, the evening settled into darkness, and somewhere in the house, Ethan slept peacefully, no longer afraid that the woman his father married would erase his mother's memory. The prenuptial agreement that had once felt like a prison now protected what they were building, the proof that love could exist independent of financial entanglement, that choice mattered more than obligation, that two people could find their way to each other even through manipulation and control and profound misunderstanding. Caleb thought about the night he'd signed that contract, watching the Caldwells celebrate what they thought was their victory. They'd had no idea they were handing him the very tool he'd need to save himself, to save his son, and ultimately, to save his marriage. The irony was exquisite, and the possibility growing between them, fragile but real, was worth every painful step it had taken to get here. The standoff with Richard didn't end with a single confrontation. 3 days after Vanessa asked her father to leave, Patricia arrived with tears and recriminations, accusing them of tearing the family apart. The week after that, Graham showed up as mediator, trying to broker peace between his sister and their parents. The Caldwells, it seemed, didn't accept defeat gracefully. But something fundamental had shifted in Vanessa. Each time her parents pushed, she pushed back, not with Caleb's quiet resistance, but with the forceful clarity of someone who'd finally discovered her own voice. She set boundaries and enforced them. She stopped apologizing for decisions that didn't require apology. And slowly, painfully, her parents began to understand that their daughter was no longer the compliant vessel for their ambitions. "They'll come around eventually," Dr. Winters said during their 14th therapy session, "or they won't. Either way, you're both learning that you can survive without their approval." "It doesn't feel like surviving," Vanessa admitted. "It feels like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to find some way to punish us." "That's the conditioning talking," Dr. Winters replied. "You were raised to believe that love is transactional, that it can be withdrawn as punishment. Real love doesn't work that way." Caleb reached for Vanessa's hand. "We're figuring that out." "I can see that. The question is, are you ready to model it for your children? Because that baby is coming soon, and Ethan is watching how you navigate all of this." They both nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders, not just to each other, but to the family they were building from such fractured foundations. Vanessa's pregnancy progressed into the 3rd trimester with increasing discomfort and decreasing patience. She was swollen and irritable, sleeping poorly, complaining constantly about her back, her feet, her inability to see her own toes. But there was something genuine in her misery, something unguarded that Caleb found oddly endearing. "I'm enormous," she announced one evening, examining her profile in the mirror with dismay. "How is it possible that I have 2 more months of this?" "You're beautiful," Caleb said. "You're legally required to say that." "I'm legally required to stay married to you. I'm not legally required to mean it when I say you're beautiful." She turned from the mirror, eyes searching his face for signs of performance. Finding none, she softened. You really think so? I really do. You're carrying our daughter. There's nothing more beautiful than that. Vanessa crossed to him, moving with the awkward gait of late pregnancy, and settled into his arms. I'm scared. About the birth? About being a mother? About screwing this up the way I've screwed up everything else? You didn't screw up everything. You made mistakes. We both did. You didn't trap me with a secret pregnancy. No, but I married you without really knowing you. I was lonely and grieving, and I let myself believe in a fantasy instead of doing the hard work of building something real. She pulled back to look at him. We're building it now, though, aren't we? Yeah, we are. The reality of impending parenthood hit Ethan in unexpected ways. He'd been cautiously excited about having a sister, asking occasional questions about babies and how they worked. But as Vanessa's due date approached, his anxiety manifested in nightmares and clingy behavior. What if you forget about me? He asked Caleb one night after a particularly vivid bad dream. Once the baby comes, what if you don't have time for me anymore? Caleb pulled his son close. That's never going to happen. Never. You're my first child, my buddy, my champ. Nothing changes that. But babies need lots of attention. They do. And there might be times when I'm tired or distracted, but you will always, always be important to me. You're not being replaced, Ethan. Our family is just growing. What about Miss Vanessa? Will she forget about me? It was Vanessa who answered, appearing in the doorway in her nightgown, one hand supporting her massive belly. I could never forget about you, Ethan. You're the one who taught me how to make terrible cookies, remember? Ethan managed a small smile. They were really bad. The worst, but making them with you was one of the best afternoons I've had in years. She moved into the room, settling carefully on the edge of the bed. Can I tell you something? I'm scared too. Scared I won't be a good mom to your sister. Scared I'll mess everything up. Really? You seem like you know everything. Vanessa laughed. I'm very good at pretending I know everything, but the truth is, I'm learning as I go, just like you are, just like your dad is. But Dad's already a dad. He's good at it. He is, Vanessa agreed. And you know what? He's going to help me learn, and you can help too if you want. You know things about being a kid that I've forgotten, things your sister is going to need to know. Ethan considered this, his anxiety visibly easing under the weight of being given responsibility instead of being sidelined. I could teach her stuff, like how to draw and build with blocks. Exactly. She's going to need a big brother to show her how the world works. After Ethan finally fell asleep, Caleb found Vanessa in the nursery, standing before the crib they'd assembled together, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? He asked, alarmed. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She wiped her eyes ineffectively. I keep thinking about how close I came to ruining this, to ruining us. If you hadn't overheard that phone call, if your inheritance hadn't forced everything into the open, I would have just kept playing my games until there was nothing real left between us. But that's not what happened. Only because you were strong enough to confront me, to demand better. She turned to face him. I don't deserve you, Caleb. I don't deserve Ethan, and I'm terrified I don't deserve this baby either. Caleb crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. Deserving has nothing to do with it. We're all just people, Vanessa. Flawed, complicated people trying to do better than we did yesterday. That's all parenting is. All marriage is, just trying, failing, learning, and trying again. What if I can't do it? What if I revert to who I was? Then we'll work through it, together. That's what the prenuptial agreement taught me. We're in this by choice now, not obligation. Every day we choose each other is a day we're building something real. Vanessa's water broke 3 weeks before her due date, during a rainstorm that turned their quiet street into a river. Caleb was grading papers in the study when he heard her cry out, and by the time he reached the bedroom, she was standing in a puddle of amniotic fluid with an expression of pure panic. It's too early, she said. The baby's not supposed to come yet. 3 weeks early is fine. The doctor said anything after 37 weeks is safe. Caleb was already moving, grabbing the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, calling Mrs. Chen to come stay with Ethan. We're okay. Everything's okay. How are you so calm? I've done this before, remember? Right. You're the experienced one. She gripped his arm as a contraction hit. Oh God, that hurts. Why did no one tell me it would hurt this much? Everyone told you it would hurt this much. I thought they were exaggerating. The drive to the hospital was tense. Vanessa breathing through contractions while Caleb navigated flooded streets and late-night traffic. She squeezed his hand hard enough to leave marks, apologizing between contractions and then cursing him for getting her pregnant in the first place. This is your fault, she gasped as another wave of pain hit. I recall you being an active participant. I hate you. I know. I love you. I know that too. Labor lasted 14 hours, long and exhausting, and punctuated by Vanessa's increasingly creative profanity. Caleb stayed by her side the entire time, letting her crush his hand, wiping her forehead, breathing with her through contractions the way they'd learned in birthing class. Her mask was completely gone now, stripped away by pain and fear and the primal intensity of bringing life into the world. She was raw, real, and absolutely magnificent. I can't do this, she sobbed during transition, the hardest part. Caleb, I can't. It's too much. You can. You are. You're doing it right now. I want my mother. The admission was torn from her, the wounded cry of a child in pain. Caleb stroked her sweat-soaked hair. I'll call her. As soon as the baby's born, I'll call her. I promise. She's going to say I told you so, about everything. Probably, but you can handle it. Can I? Vanessa, you stood up to your father. You're literally pushing a human being out of your body right now. You can handle anything. She laughed through her tears, the sound slightly hysterical but genuine. When did you become such a motivational speaker? When I fell in love with a woman who needed reminding how strong she is. The baby came at dawn, emerging into the world with a furious cry that filled the delivery room with sound and light and indescribable joy. The nurse placed her on Vanessa's chest, this tiny, perfect creature with Caleb's dark hair and Vanessa's delicate features, and the world narrowed to just the three of them. Oh, Vanessa whispered, staring at her daughter with wonder. Oh, she's perfect. She really is. Sarah Elizabeth, Vanessa said, looking up at Caleb. For your first wife and my middle name, if that's okay. Caleb couldn't speak past the emotion clogging his throat, so he just nodded, kissing Vanessa's forehead and then his daughter's. This tiny person who represented everything they'd fought for and everything they'd nearly lost. Patricia and Richard arrived 2 hours later, summoned by Caleb's call and arriving with the stiff formality of people unsure of their welcome. But when Patricia saw her granddaughter, something in her face cracked open. Oh, Vanessa, she breathed. She's beautiful. Her name is Sarah Elizabeth, Vanessa said, and Caleb heard the challenge in her tone. Sarah for Caleb's late wife. Patricia absorbed this, glanced at Richard, then back to her daughter. That's a lovely name, a strong name. It wasn't an apology. It was an acceptance of everything that had happened, but it was acknowledgement, and for now, that was enough. Richard held his granddaughter with unexpected tenderness, his usual bluster softened by the weight of new life in his arms. She has the Caldwell chin, he announced. She has Caleb's eyes, Patricia countered. She has both, Vanessa said firmly. She's ours, all of ours. Ethan arrived with Mrs. Chen that afternoon, nervous and excited in equal measure. He approached the hospital bed cautiously, staring at his new sister with wide eyes. She's really small, he observed. You were this small once, Caleb told him. Can I hold her? Vanessa helped arrange Ethan in the chair, supporting the baby carefully as she placed Sarah in his arms. Ethan went very still, his face serious with concentration. Hi, Sarah, he whispered. I'm your big brother. I'm going to teach you lots of stuff, like how to draw dinosaurs and tie your shoes. And when you're sad, you can talk to me about Mom. The first one, I mean, because Dad says it's important to remember people we love, even when they're gone. Caleb felt Vanessa's hand find his, squeezing tight. When he looked at her, tears were streaming down her face again. Happy tears? She clarified. I didn't know I could feel this much. The first weeks with Sarah were exhausting, beautiful chaos. Vanessa, to everyone's surprise, including her own, took to motherhood with fierce devotion. She nursed through cracked nipples and mastitis. She handled midnight feedings and diaper blowouts and endless crying jags. She was terrible at it and wonderful at it simultaneously, learning to trust her instincts instead of consulting experts for every decision. "I think she's hungry again," Vanessa said one night, the third time Sarah had woken up, crying. "You just fed her an hour ago." "I know, but look at her. She's rooting. That means hungry, right?" "Could mean hungry. Could mean she wants comfort. Could mean she has gas." "How do you tell the difference?" "You guess and hope you're right." Vanessa laughed, exhausted and radiant. "This is so much harder than I thought it would be." And I love it. I love her. I love watching you with her. I love that Ethan holds her every day after school and tells her about his day." She shifted Sarah to her other breast, wincing. "I even love the parts that hurt because they mean she's mine, ours." But the real transformation came when Vanessa started venturing beyond their house, beyond the insulated world of nannies and night nurses and professional help. She joined a mother's group at the local community center, sitting in a circle of women from every background imaginable, discussing sleep schedules and teething and the terrifying responsibility of keeping tiny humans alive. "I met someone today," she told Caleb one afternoon. "Her name is Maria. She's a waitress raising 3 kids on her own. Her oldest is Ethan's age." "That's nice." "She has no family support, no money for childcare, no safety net at all." Vanessa's voice was thoughtful. "And she's doing it. Not perfectly, but she's doing it. She makes less in a month than I used to spend on shoes, and she's raising 3 kids who are polite and kind and clearly loved." Caleb set down the paper he'd been grading. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about your uncle's inheritance, the scholarship fund you wanted to start." She met his eyes. "What if we expanded it? Not just college scholarships, but help for families like Maria's. Childcare assistance, tutoring programs, parent support groups, real help for people who are working hard but need a break." "That's a big undertaking." "I know, but I have time now. I'm not working, not chairing charity galas or planning social events. What if I actually did something that mattered?" She looked down at Sarah, sleeping in her arms. "I want our daughter to grow up seeing that privilege means responsibility, that having money isn't about maintaining status, it's about helping people who need it." Caleb crossed to her, kissed the top of her head. "I think that's a beautiful idea." "Yeah? Yeah, let's do it." They named it the Sarah Moore Foundation, honoring both Caleb's late wife and their daughter. Vanessa threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd once devoted to maintaining her social calendar, but now the drive came from genuine passion rather than performance. She learned about nonprofit management, grant writing, community outreach. She sat on folding chairs in community centers and listened to parents share their struggles without offering empty platitudes or easy solutions. And something remarkable happened. The women in these circles, women who had every reason to resent someone with Vanessa's background and resources, embraced her. Not because of her money, but because she showed up authentically, shared her own struggles with new motherhood, and treated them as equals rather than charity cases. "Maria's daughter needs tutoring in math," Vanessa mentioned one evening. "I was thinking maybe you could help, or recommend someone from the academy." "I can tutor her myself, a couple hours a week, no problem." "You do that." "Vanessa, this is what I love about teaching, helping kids who need it. Of course I'd do that." She smiled at him, the expression soft and genuine. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the last few hours." "Well, I do. Crazy, impossible amounts." The foundation grew, adding programs and reaching more families. Vanessa recruited her mother to the board, a calculated move that gave Patricia purpose while keeping her appropriately distant from the day-to-day operations. Even Richard contributed, matching every dollar the foundation raised with money from his hedge fund, though he made sure everyone knew it was for tax purposes. "He's trying," Vanessa said after a particularly productive board meeting. "In his own way." "He is," Caleb agreed. "We'll never have the relationship I wanted with them. They'll never be the parents I needed growing up." "No, but they're trying to be the grandparents Sarah and Ethan need. That's something." It was something. Not everything, not perfect, but something real and worth preserving. On Sarah's first birthday, they hosted a party in their backyard. A casual affair with bouncy castles and cake smash photos, and children from the mother's group mixing with Ethan's friends from school. Patricia arrived overdressed and scandalized by the chaos. Richard looked uncomfortable around so many people he didn't know. But they stayed, and they smiled, and when Sarah demolished her cake with gleeful abandon, they laughed along with everyone else. Ethan, now 9 and increasingly confident, took his role as big brother seriously. He helped with diaper changes and bottle preparation. He made Sarah laugh with silly faces and read her board books with exaggerated voices. And when she started walking, he was there to catch her when she fell, encouraging her to try again. "You're good at this," Vanessa told him one afternoon, watching him play with Sarah. "Being a brother. It's easy. She's pretty cool for a baby." "Can I ask you something?" Vanessa settled beside him on the floor. "Do you think of me as your mom? You don't have to say yes. I'm just curious." Ethan thought about it with his characteristic seriousness. "I think of you as Vanessa, Sarah's mom, but also kind of my mom too. Like you do mom things for me. You make my lunch and come to my school stuff and tell me when I'm being annoying, but you're not trying to replace my first mom, so it's different. Good different or bad different? Just different, but good, I think." He looked up at her. "Is that okay?" "That's perfect." Vanessa pulled him into a hug. "You can call me whatever feels right. Mom, Vanessa, hey you. It doesn't matter as long as you know I love you. Even when I'm annoying. Especially when you're annoying." That evening, after both children were asleep, Caleb and Vanessa sat in their bedroom, the room that had felt like a stage set 2 years ago and now felt like home. Vanessa was sorting through Sarah's outgrown clothes, deciding what to keep for potential future children and what to donate to the foundation. "Do you want more?" Caleb asked. "More children?" "Maybe, someday. Do you?" "I think I'd like a big family, if you do." Vanessa set down the tiny onesie she'd been folding. "I never thought I'd be good at this. Being a mother, being a wife. I thought I'd hire people to do the hard parts and just show up for the photo opportunities." "What changed?" "You changed. You demanded I be real, and being real turned out to be so much better than performing." She moved to the bed, settled against him. "I look at Sarah, at Ethan, at the life we've built, and I can't believe I almost destroyed it all because I was too scared to be honest. You didn't destroy it. We're here. Because you wouldn't let me. Because you had the courage to confront me, to demand better, to walk away if necessary." She took his hand, placed it over her heart. "The prenuptial agreement was supposed to protect my family's money. Instead, it protected us, protected you from being trapped by financial dependence, protected me from myself." Irony at its finest. Your inheritance, the confrontation, all of it, it forced us to choose each other freely, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. She turned to look at him. "I choose you, Caleb, every day. Not because you're the father of my child or because divorce would be complicated. I choose you because you're kind and patient, and you see the best in people even when they're showing you their worst. I choose you too, the real you, not the person you thought you had to be." They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from genuine intimacy and shared experience. Downstairs, the house was quiet except for the soft whir of the dishwasher and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Through the window, stars were visible beyond the city lights, constant and unchanging. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd refused to sign the prenup?" Vanessa asked quietly. "Sometimes. We probably wouldn't have gotten married." "Would that have been better?" "No, it would have been easier, safer, but not better. Everything we've learned, everything we've become, it happened because we did the hard thing." Caleb pulled her closer. "The prenuptial agreement didn't trap us. It challenged us to build something that could survive without financial obligation or social pressure, to build something real. We did though, didn't we? Build something real. Yeah, we really did." 2 years after that confrontation in the living room, on Caleb's 37th birthday, Vanessa presented him with a gift. Not jewelry or expensive watches or any of the luxury items she might have chosen in her previous life. Instead, she handed him a folder containing legal documents. "What is this?" he asked, confused. Look. He opened the folder and found a motion to dissolve their prenuptial agreement, already signed by Vanessa and waiting for his signature. His heart stuttered in his chest. You want to void this prenup? I want us to be married without it. No clauses protecting my assets or yours, no predetermined custody arrangements, no escape hatches or legal protections. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook. Just two people choosing to build a life together, trusting each other completely. Vanessa, you don't have to do this. The agreement works fine as it is. I know I don't have to, but I want to. That contract represents everything that was wrong with us at the beginning. Fear, control, lack of trust. We're not those people anymore. She took his hands. I trust you with my money, my children, my life. And I want our marriage to reflect that. No safety nets, just us. Caleb stared at the documents, understanding the magnitude of what she was offering. The prenuptial agreement had protected him when he'd needed protection, had given him the freedom to demand change without fear of financial ruin. But it had also been a constant reminder of how they'd started, in manipulation and control rather than love. Are you sure? He asked. Completely sure. Sign it, Caleb. Let's be married for real, without any contracts between us except the ones we made in front of that priest. He signed his name carefully, watching 2 years of growth and struggle and hard-won trust become official. When he looked up, Vanessa was crying again. Those happy tears that had become so familiar since Sarah's birth. Happy birthday, she whispered. Best gift you've ever given me. Better than the Audi? So much better than the Audi. They took the documents to their attorney the next day, officially dissolving the agreement that had once seemed so important to the Caldwell family. Patricia was horrified when she found out. Richard was furious, but Vanessa stood firm. It's our marriage, she told her parents. Our choice. And we choose trust over protection. The foundation continued to grow, helping hundreds of families across the state. Vanessa became known not as Richard Caldwell's daughter, or a wealthy socialite, but as someone who genuinely cared about making a difference. She formed real friendships with women like Maria, relationships built on mutual respect rather than social obligation. Caleb continued teaching, turning down repeated offers of administration positions because he loved working directly with students. His classroom became a refuge for kids who needed someone to believe in them, and the scholarship program he and Vanessa had created sent dozens of students to college who otherwise couldn't have afforded it. Ethan thrived, growing into a thoughtful young man who treated his sister with patient kindness and spoke about both his mothers with equal love, Sarah, who'd given him life, and Vanessa, who'd learned to be present in his. He was popular at school, excelled at math and science, and showed signs of inherited his father's teaching gift. And Sarah grew into a delightful toddler, strong-willed and curious, with her mother's determination and her father's quiet intelligence. She adored her brother, followed him everywhere, and was learning that being a Caldwell meant responsibility to others rather than superiority over them. On a quiet Sunday morning 3 years after Sarah's birth, Caleb found Vanessa in the kitchen making breakfast. Still not very good at it, but trying anyway. Ethan was setting the table, Sarah was singing to herself in her high chair, and morning light streamed through windows that no longer felt like part of a museum. "What are you smiling about?" Vanessa asked, catching his expression. "This? All of this? Our family. It's pretty good, isn't it? It's perfect." "Not perfect. The eggs are burnt again. And Sarah threw her sippy cup on the floor 3 times already. And Ethan has soccer practice at noon, which means I need to cancel my lunch plans." "Perfectly imperfect, then." Vanessa crossed to him, kissed him soundly. "I'll take it." Later, after breakfast had been consumed and the kitchen cleaned, after Ethan had gone to soccer and Sarah was down for her nap, Caleb found himself in his study looking at the photo he'd kept from that night at the Caldwell mansion, the night he'd signed the prenuptial agreement. He was about to throw it away when Vanessa appeared in the doorway. "What's that?" "Picture from the night we got engaged. Well, the night your father made me sign away my dignity." She took the photo, studied it with clinical distance. "We look so different, so young and stupid." "Speak for yourself. I was appropriately aged and only moderately stupid." "You were desperately lonely and I was performing generosity. We were both stupid." She handed back the photo. "Are you keeping it or burning it?" I'm not sure. Part of me wants to erase that whole period. Part of me thinks we should remember it. Remember it, Vanessa said firmly. Keep the photo. Not to torture ourselves, but to remember how far we've come. How we almost destroyed something beautiful before we even knew what we had. Caleb looked at the photo again. Himself in an ill-fitting suit, Vanessa radiant and calculating, the prenuptial agreement like a weapon between them. They'd been strangers then, playing roles neither of them understood. Now they were partners, parents, people who'd earned their love through honesty and struggle, and refusing to give up when giving up would have been easier. You're right, he said, placing the photo in his desk drawer. We should remember, so we never take this for granted. Never, Vanessa agreed. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, not a formal affair, but a chaotic meal of pasta and garlic bread and vegetable that Sarah refused to eat. Patricia and Richard were there, having learned to accept their diminished but still meaningful role in their daughter's life. Graham brought his new girlfriend, a public school teacher who got along famously with Caleb. Even Mrs. Chen joined them, having become something like family over the years. The conversation flowed easily, full of laughter and gentle teasing and the comfortable rhythm of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. It wasn't the life Richard and Patricia had envisioned for their daughter. Not glamorous enough, not exclusive enough, too messy and middle class. But watching Vanessa glow with genuine happiness, even they had to admit it suited her. After everyone left and the children were in bed, Caleb and Vanessa stood in their backyard looking up at stars that were finally visible now that they'd had the security lights removed. The night was cool and clear, full of possibilities. Do you ever regret it? Vanessa asked. Any of it? Which part? All of it. Marrying me when you did, the prenup, the fights, the years of struggling to become people who could actually love each other. Caleb considered this carefully, giving her the honesty she deserved. I regret that we hurt each other. I regret that Ethan had to witness dysfunction when he'd already lost so much. I regret that we almost destroyed something precious because we were too scared to be vulnerable. But I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret Sarah or the foundation or the life we've built. I don't even regret the prenuptial agreement because it taught us something we needed to learn. What's that? That real marriage isn't about contracts or obligations or protecting yourself from worst-case scenarios. It's about choosing to trust someone even when you're scared. Choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier. Choosing each other every single day because the life you build together is worth more than the safety of being alone. Vanessa leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, feeling the solid reality of their life together. The prenuptial agreement that had once seemed like a cage had ultimately set them free. Free to build something genuine, something chosen, something that belonged to them alone. I love you, she said simply. I love you too. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama, but bearing witness nonetheless. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved unconditionally. And in that backyard in that moment, two people who'd started as strangers, connected by a contract designed to keep them apart, stood together as partners who'd earned their happiness one difficult choice at a time. The prenuptial agreement that was supposed to protect them from each other had instead protected what mattered most, the truth that love, real love, couldn't be contracted or controlled or purchased. It could only be chosen, nurtured, and earned through the daily work of showing up honestly, even when honesty was terrifying. They had shown up. They had chosen each other. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference. Money had revealed who Vanessa was capable of being when she felt threatened and scared. But choice, the freedom to walk away, the decision to stay, had revealed who she could become when she was brave enough to be real. The contract remained unsigned and forgotten in a drawer somewhere, no longer needed, no longer relevant. What mattered now was the family they'd built, the love they'd earned, and the future they were creating together, messily, imperfectly, and beautifully real.